I never told my daughter what I kept in that rusted warehouse downtown. To her, it was just a pile of junk I refused to sell, a relic of a business I closed years ago. But when she married Bryce, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes, I knew my secrets were in danger. The call came at midnight on a Tuesday. It was Mrs. Mercer, the warehouse manager. Her voice was shaking. "Sir, he is here. He has bolt cutters, and he is trying to cut the main padlock." I did not panic. I did not call the police immediately. I sat in my leather armchair in the dark, watching the security feed on my tablet. I had been waiting for this moment. I took a slow sip of my bourbon and whispered, "Go ahead, son. Break in." Because Bryce did not know that breaking into that warehouse would be the worst mistake of his life. And he certainly did not know that what was waiting for him inside was not gold or cash, but something far more dangerous. I am Ulysses Stone, 68 years old. I am a widower, a former Marine, and a retired mechanical engineer. I built my life on precision, on hard work, and on the belief that you earn what you keep. I spent 40 years building machines that could withstand high pressure, but nothing prepared me for the pressure of watching a stranger try to dismantle my life brick by brick. My daughter Kendra is smart, she is kind, but she has her mother's heart, a heart that trusts too easily. She did not see what I saw. She saw a charming entrepreneur. I saw a predator waiting to strike. Before I tell you how I destroyed a con artist with nothing but a few legal documents and an old machine, tell me where you are listening from in the comments. Hit like if you believe that a father's duty to protect his child never ends even when that child is 28 years old. It started at the reception. The crystal ballroom was suffocatingly hot and smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. I loosened my tie watching Kendra dance. She looked just like her mother Lucille. Beautiful, radiating joy. I wanted to freeze that moment to keep her smiling before reality crashed down. But the music stopped. The head waiter approached our table. He was holding a leather folder with both hands like it was a sacred text. He did not look at me. He looked at Bryce the groom. Bryce did not even flinch. He just pointed a manicured finger at me while sipping his drink. "Give the bill to him," Bryce said, his voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "My father-in-law insists on handling the finances. He wants to feel useful." The waiter hesitated, then handed me the folder. I opened it. The number at the bottom of the receipt made my breath hitch. $50,000. I had agreed to pay for the venue and the food. That was $20,000. I had written the check 2 days ago. Where did the extra $30,000 come from? I looked down the itemized list. Vintage Dom Perignon, 50 bottles, imported caviar, truffles. These were items I had never approved. These were items Bryce had ordered behind my back. I stood up. My knees popped, a painful reminder of my years in the service. "Bryce," I said, keeping my voice low. "We agreed on the standard champagne. We agreed on the chicken and fish. Who ordered this?" Bryce laughed. He wrapped an arm around Kendra, pulling her close like she was a trophy he had just won at a carnival. "Come on, Ulysses, don't embarrass Kendra. It is a celebration. You can afford it. Everyone knows you were sitting on a pile of cash from that old factory of yours. Or are you just being a miser?" The disrespect was palpable. He did not call me Mr. Stone. He did not ask. He demanded. The guests at the nearby tables stopped talking. They were watching, waiting. I looked at Kendra. She looked confused, her eyes darting between her new husband and her father. "Dad, just pay it, please," she whispered. "Don't make a scene." "I am paying what I promised," I said, my voice steady. I took out my checkbook and my fountain pen. "I am writing a check for $20,000. The rest is yours, Bryce. You ordered it. You pay for it." The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Bryce's face turned a shade of red I had only seen on boiled lobsters. His charm evaporated instantly, replaced by a sneer that twisted his handsome features. "You cheap old man," he hissed. "You are going to ruin your daughter's night over a few bottles. This is why you people never stay rich. You hold on to pennies and let life pass you by. You do not know how to live. You people." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Kendra gasped. I saw the shock on the waiter's face. I looked Bryce in the eye. I did not see a son-in-law. I saw an enemy. I saw a man who thought my skin color and my age made me weak. He thought he could bully me into submission with public shaming. He was wrong. I tore the check I had just written. Then I took the $50,000 bill and tore that too precisely in half. I dropped the pieces into his half-eaten lobster bisque. "Welcome to the family, Bryce," I said loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You just inherited your first debt. Good luck explaining this to the management." I walked out of the ballroom, leaving a stunned silence in my wake. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I thought I had won. I thought I had taught him a lesson about boundaries. I was naive. I did not realize that I had just declared war and Bryce was about to launch a counterattack that would hit me right where I lived. I expected an apology. I expected Kendra to call me crying, saying she had made a mistake. I stayed up half the night waiting for the phone to ring. It never did. The next morning I was in my kitchen drinking black coffee and staring at the empty chair where Lucille used to sit. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I was just about to pour a second cup when the front door opened. I did not hear the polite knock of a guest. I heard the thumping of heavy luggage. Bryce walked in first. He was not wearing a tuxedo anymore. He was wearing ripped jeans and a t-shirt that looked expensive but sloppy. He was carrying 3 large boxes. Kendra followed him, looking exhausted, her mascara smudged under her eyes. She wouldn't look at me. "We canceled Hawaii," Bryce announced, dropping a box on my clean granite kitchen counter. The thud echoed through the house. "Since you decided to humiliate us and cut us off financially last night, we had to use the honeymoon money to pay the bar tab. We are broke, Ulysses, and it is your fault." He walked over to the fridge, opened it, and took out a carton of orange juice. My orange juice. He drank directly from the carton, the liquid spilling slightly onto his chin. He wiped it with his sleeve. He didn't just drink the juice, he claimed it. He was marking his territory. So he continued tossing the empty carton into the sink. "We are moving in just until we get back on our feet. We rented out our apartment this morning to get some cash. We have nowhere else to go." I looked at Kendra. "Is this true?" I asked. She finally looked up and I saw the manipulation in her eyes. She had been coached. "Dad, we have no choice," she said, her voice trembling. "You embarrassed Bryce. You owe us this. We are family." Family. That word used to mean everything to me. Now it felt like a weapon. Bryce did not wait for my permission. He clapped his hands together, rubbing them greedily. "We will take the master suite upstairs. It has the best light and the jacuzzi tub. You do not mind moving to the guest room downstairs, right? Your knees are bad anyway, so the stairs are dangerous for you. We are doing you a favor, really." He wasn't asking. He was informing. He walked out of the kitchen and headed towards the stairs, towards the bedroom I had shared with Lucille for 30 years. The bedroom where her perfume still lingered on the pillows. "Hey, Bryce," I called out. He stopped his foot on the first step. He looked down at me, a smirk playing on his lips. "What is it, old man?" I put my coffee mug down. "The master suite is locked," I lied. "I lost the key years ago. You take the guest room, or you get out." Bryce stared at me. For a second I thought he would lunge at me, but then he laughed. A cold, calculating laugh. "Fine," he said. "Guest room it is. For now. But this house needs a lot of work, Ulysses. Too much old junk. Too many dusty memories. We need to modernize. We need to clean house." He walked past me, bumping his shoulder against mine. It wasn't an accident. He began dragging his boxes into the living room, pushing my favorite armchair, my reading chair, against the wall to make space for his massive gaming monitor. I stood in the center of my kitchen, feeling the walls closing in. The enemy wasn't just at the gate anymore. He was inside the wire. He was sleeping under my roof, eating my food, and plotting to take my room. I looked at the calendar on the wall. It was Sunday, the day I usually visited the warehouse. I realized then that I had to protect that key. Because if Bryce was this hungry for a master bedroom, imagine what he would do if he knew about the millions of dollars worth of prototypes sitting in the dark just 5 miles away. I watched him kick his shoes off, leaving them in the middle of the hallway. I took a deep breath. Let him get comfortable, I thought. Let him think he has won. Because the comfortable man gets careless, and I would be watching, waiting for him to make his move. And I knew it wouldn't take long. The sound of screeching wood against hardwood floors woke me up at 6 in the morning. It was a violent sound, like something being dragged against its will. I grabbed my robe and walked down the hallway towards my study. That room was my sanctuary. It was where I designed my first engine, and where I sat in the evenings to read Lucille's old journals. But as I stood in the doorway, I felt the blood drain from my face. My study was gone. In its place was a chaotic mess of modern ambition. Bryce was there, shirtless and sweating, pushing my heavy oak desk, the one my father built by hand, toward the window. He wanted the natural light, he said later, but right now he just looked like a thief ransacking a home. The bookshelves were empty. My engineering encyclopedias, my framed patent awards, and the small ceramic angel Lucille had painted 2 weeks before she died were all gone from the shelves. They were dumped haphazardly into 3 large cardboard boxes marked donation. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep and rising anger. Bryce didn't even turn around. He grunted, shoving the desk another inch, optimizing the workspace. "Ulysses, if I am going to run my startup from here, I need a feng shui that screams success." This room was screaming depression. No offense, but it smelled like old paper and stagnation. I walked over to the boxes. I saw the ceramic angel lying face down at the bottom under a heavy stack of magazines. One of its wings was chipped. My chest tightened. That angel was the last thing Lucille's hands had created. It was priceless to me. To Bryce, it was just clutter. I reached down and picked up the angel, brushing the dust off its broken wing. "You do not touch my things," I said quietly. "You do not touch her things." Bryce finally turned around. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and let out a dramatic sigh. "Look, I am doing you a favor." Kendra said, "You have been hoarding this stuff for years. It is unhealthy. You are holding on to ghosts. I am clearing the energy so we can make money. This isn't just a room anymore. It is the headquarters of Miller Innovations." He pointed to the door. I looked back and saw he had already taped a piece of paper over the brass nameplate that read Ulysses Stone. The paper said CEO Bryce Miller in bold marker. It was a crude insult. He was not just taking my space. He was erasing my identity. He was telling me that my time as the man of this house was over. I carefully placed the angel in my robe pocket. "Put my books back," I said. "No can do," Bryce replied, picking up his laptop and slamming it onto my desk. "I need the shelf space for inventory. Besides, you can keep that box in the garage. That is where old tools belong, right? In the garage with the rest of the obsolete equipment." I stood there for a long moment. I could have dragged him out of that chair. I still had the strength, but I saw the way he was looking at me. He wanted a reaction. He wanted me to lose my temper so he could run to Kendra and play the victim again. He wanted to say, "See, your dad is violent, he is unstable." I would not give him that satisfaction. Not yet. I picked up the box with Lucille's things. It was heavy, but I didn't drag it. I carried it. "I will move this," I said. "But if you scratch that desk, Bryce, you will pay for it." He laughed. A short, dismissive bark of a laugh. "Relax, old timer. It is just wood." I walked out of the room feeling the weight of the box in my arms and the weight of his disrespect on my shoulders. I took the box to the basement and placed it gently on a high shelf. Then I sat on the cold concrete steps and breathed. In and out. I was a sniper waiting for a target. I just needed him to show himself fully. When I went back upstairs an hour later to get my coffee, Bryce was still in the office. But the mood had changed. He wasn't moving furniture anymore. He was sitting at my desk holding a stack of papers he had pulled from the bottom drawer. My stomach turned. That drawer was locked, or at least it was supposed to be. He must have pried it open while I was downstairs. He didn't hear me approach. He was too focused on the document in his hand. It was a property tax bill. "Well, well, well," he muttered to himself. "What do we have here?" I stepped into the doorway. "I told you to put the books back, not go through my private financial records." Bryce jumped slightly, but he recovered quickly. He spun the chair around, waving the paper in the air like a flag. "I was looking for a stapler," he lied smoothly. "But I found this instead." "Ulysses, are you senile or do you just hate money?" He stood up and walked toward me, tapping the paper with his index finger. "You are paying $12,000 a year in property taxes for a derelict warehouse in the industrial district. Warehouse number 4. I looked it up on my phone just now. It is a rust bucket. The roof is probably leaking. The zoning is terrible. Why are you bleeding cash for a dump like that?" I snatched the paper from his hand. "It is none of your business," I said, folding it and putting it in my pocket. "It is storage." "Storage for what?" Bryce pressed his eyes, narrowing. "More ceramic angels. More old books. You are sitting on a prime piece of land. Even if the building is trash, the land is worth something. We could sell it. We could inject that capital into my company. I could turn that $12,000 liability into $1 million asset in 2 years. I felt a cold chill. He had only been in my house for 24 hours, and he was already trying to liquidate my assets. He didn't care about the history of that warehouse. He didn't know that inside those walls were the prototypes for the hydraulic systems that were currently being used in deep-sea oil rigs. He just saw a dollar sign. "It is not for sale," I said firmly. "And it is not empty. It contains heavy machinery, dangerous machinery." Bryce's eyes lit up. "Machinery," he repeated. "Scrap metal. That is even better. Copper prices are at an all-time high. We could strip that place bare and make a fortune just on the salvage rights. Ulysses, you are sitting on a gold mine and you are treating it like a cemetery. This is why you need me. You need someone with vision to manage your estate. You are too emotional." He tried to put his hand on my shoulder, a patronizing gesture. I stepped back. "Stay away from that warehouse, Bryce," I warned him. "The security is tight for a reason." He smirked. "Tight security for a pile of junk. Sure, whatever you say. But think about it. Kendra deserves a better life than this. Selling that place could buy us a real house, unless you want us living in your guest room forever." He walked back to the desk and sat down, dismissing me. I watched him for a moment. He wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. A man who looks at a tax bill and sees a lifeline is a man who is drowning in debt. He needed money fast, and I had just given him a map. I retreated to the kitchen, but I didn't make breakfast. I made a plan. Bryce thought he had conquered my office. He thought he had bullied me into silence. He didn't know that while he was busy measuring the room for his ego, I was measuring him for a coffin. I waited until noon. Bryce left the house saying he had a business lunch with investors. I knew he was lying. He was probably going to the track or a bar. I watched his car pull out of the driveway, then I went straight back into the office. I didn't move the furniture back. I left it exactly as he had arranged it. I wanted him to feel comfortable. I wanted him to feel secure. I pulled a small black pouch from my pocket. Inside was a tiny USB drive, a keylogger. I had used similar tech to monitor employee activity at my factory years ago. I plugged it into the back of the desktop computer Bryce had claimed. It was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. It would record every keystroke, every password, every website he visited. But I didn't stop there. I reached up to the high bookshelf where he had left a few decorative plants. I placed a miniature camera between the leaves of a fake fern. It was no bigger than a button. It had a direct feed to my iPad. I sat in his chair, the chair that used to be mine. I spun it around. I looked at the room from his perspective. He thought he was the CEO of this house. He thought he was the predator. He didn't realize that by taking this room, he had walked right into a cage. I turned on the computer. I checked the installation. The keylogger was active. The camera was recording. The trap was set. I walked out of the office and closed the door gently. When Bryce came home that evening, I was sitting in the living room reading a newspaper. I looked like a defeated old man. "Did you have a good meeting?" I asked him without looking up. He grinned, tossing his keys on the table. "Fantastic," he said. "Big things are coming, Ulysses. Big things." I smiled behind my newspaper. "I know," I whispered to myself. "I know." The walls of my house are thick plaster and lathe built in 1955, but they could not block out the poison Bryce was pouring into my daughter's ear. I was sitting in the living room pretending to watch the evening news, but the volume was low. I was listening to the conversation happening in the dining room. Bryce had laid out a spread of glossy brochures on the table. They were colorful pamphlets with smiling stock photos of elderly people playing chess and staring at sunsets. They looked peaceful. They looked safe. But I knew what they really were. They were warehouses for the forgotten. Bryce's voice was low and smooth, like oil slicking over water. "Honey, look at this one," he said, tapping a brochure for a place called Pinecrest Haven. "It is only 40 minutes away. They have 24-hour supervision. You said yourself you are worried about him. Remember the stove." I gripped the armrest of my chair. The stove. 2 days ago, Bryce had turned on the gas burner while I was in the bathroom and left it running without a flame. When I came out, the kitchen smelled of gas. He had rushed in shouting, "Oh my God, Ulysses, are you trying to kill us all?" He had looked at Kendra with wide, terrified eyes. "See?" he whispered. "He is forgetting things. It is starting." It was a lie, a calculated tactical lie. But Kendra didn't know that. She only saw her father aging and her husband panicking. "I can't just send him away." Bryce, Kendra said, her voice cracking. This is his home. He built the deck out back. Mom died in that bedroom upstairs. That is exactly why he needs to leave. Bryce pressed harder. Too many memories. It is depressing him. And look at him, Kendra. He is confused. He is hostile. Yesterday he yelled at me for moving a desk. That is a symptom of early onset dementia. Aggression, paranoia. It is not safe for you to be around him when he snaps. Pinecrest is affordable. If we sell the house, we can pay for a private room for him for years. He will be happy. He will be with people his own age. I stood up and walked to the doorway. The conversation stopped instantly. Bryce covered the brochures with his hand, but he wasn't fast enough. I saw the headline on the top one: State-Assisted Living, Budget-Friendly Care. He wasn't looking at luxury homes. He was looking at the cheapest, saddest holes in the state so he could pocket the difference from the house sale. Is there a problem? I asked, staring directly at Bryce. No, Dad, Kendra said, wiping her eyes quickly. We were just discussing finances. Bryce smiled that tight shark-like smile. Just looking out for your future, Ulysses. We want to make sure you are comfortable. I am comfortable, I said, in my own house. Bryce stood up and walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. I flinched. For now, sure, he said. But we have to be realistic. You are getting older. Things happen. Accidents happen. His eyes drifted to the kitchen stove. It was a threat. He was telling me that there would be more accidents, more gas leaks, maybe a fall down the stairs. He was going to gaslight me until I actually went crazy, or until Kendra was so terrified she signed the papers herself. I looked at my daughter. She looked small and scared, caught between two men she loved. She didn't see the predator standing next to her. She only saw a concerned husband. I realized then that arguing would only prove his point. If I shouted, if I got angry, he would say, look, he is having an episode. So I swallowed my rage. I let it burn in my stomach like acid. I am going to bed, I said, keeping my voice calm. Good night, Kendra. I didn't say goodnight to Bryce. I walked away, hearing him whisper, see that vacancy in his eyes. He is checking out Kendra. We need to act fast. The attack came 2 days later on Tuesday morning. Tuesday was the day I paid the bills. It was a ritual I had maintained for 40 years. I would sit at the kitchen table with my checkbook, a cup of black coffee, and a stack of envelopes. I like to keep everything in order. Water, electricity, gas, property tax. I reviewed every line item. Bryce knew this schedule. He had been watching me. I was halfway through writing a check for the electric company when Bryce walked in. He was holding a fresh mug of coffee and a large manila envelope. He looked casual, too casual. Hey, Ulysses, let me help you with that, he said, pulling out a chair. You have been squinting at those papers for an hour. Kendra is worried you are straining your eyes. I do not need help, I grunted, not looking up. Come on, do not be stubborn, Bryce said, sliding the manila envelope onto the table. Actually, since you are in the mood for signing things, I need a favor. The city requires an updated resident form for the trash collection and the utility transfer. Since I am living here now, they need my name on the account as a secondary contact just in case of emergencies. You know, like if you are in the hospital and the power goes out. He laughed as if the idea of me in the hospital was a lighthearted joke. He pulled a document out of the envelope. It was thick, 3 pages stapled together. He placed it on top of the water bill I was about to pay. Just sign here at the bottom, he said, pointing to a line marked Owner Authorization. It just says I can talk to the utility companies if the pipes burst. Standard stuff. I looked at the document. The text was dense, single-spaced, and written in small font. The header was folded over so I couldn't see the title. Bryce was tapping the signature line with his finger, creating a sense of urgency. I adjusted my reading glasses. I will read it first, I said. Bryce sighed, loud and impatient. It is just a utility form, Ulysses. Jesus, you are paranoid. Kendra is waiting in the car. We are going to brunch. Do you want me to tell her you are holding us up because you do not trust her husband to pay the water bill? He was using Kendra as leverage again. He knew I didn't want to upset her. He leaned in his cologne, overpowering the smell of my coffee. Just sign it, old man. Save us both the headache. I looked closer at the text. My eyes were old, but they were sharp. I saw phrases that didn't belong in a utility form. Power of attorney. Granting full authority to manage, dispose, and liquidate assets. Real property located at. This wasn't a trash collection form. This was a deed transfer disguised as administrative paperwork. If I signed this, Bryce would have the legal power to sell my house, my car, and my warehouse without me even knowing. My heart hammered against my ribs. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was a senile old fool who would sign my life away just to avoid a confrontation. I looked at his face. He was smiling, but his eyes were hard. He was expecting me to fold. "Okay," I said, letting my voice tremble slightly. "I do not want to be a burden. I will sign." I reached for my pen, my hand shaking just enough to sell the performance. Bryce's smile widened. He looked like a wolf that had just cornered a rabbit. He didn't know that this rabbit was a Marine who had specialized in setting traps. I lifted the pen, but then I let out a gasp. My elbow hit my coffee mug, knocking it slightly. I grabbed the mug to steady it, and in the commotion I swiped my arm across the table. My reading glasses went flying off my nose and skittered across the kitchen floor, sliding under the refrigerator. "Oh, damn it," I muttered, playing up the frailty. "My glasses. I can't see a thing without them." Bryce groaned. "You are kidding me. Stay there. I will get them." He bent down, getting on his hands and knees to reach under the fridge. It was a tight squeeze. He had to turn his head away from the table. That was the moment. The second his eyes were off me, the trembling in my hands vanished. I moved with the speed of a man half my age. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan where I had stashed my own document earlier that morning. I had printed it the night before after finding a draft of Bryce's scheme in the printer tray memory. My document looked exactly like his. Same font, same layout. But the text was different. Instead of granting him power of attorney, this document was a binding declaration that the signer acknowledged he was a guest in the home with no legal claim to residency or assets, and that any attempt to sell property would result in immediate eviction. I grabbed Bryce's document and slid it under the stack of paid bills. I placed my decoy document in front of me. The swap took 3 seconds. "Got them." Bryce grunted from the floor. He stood up, brushing dust off his knees and handing me the glasses. "Here. Now sign the damn paper so we can leave." I put the glasses back on. I squinted at the decoy document, pretending to struggle with the focus. Okay, I muttered. "Utility form." "Right." I signed my name with a flourish. Ulysses Stone. Bryce snatched the paper away the moment the ink left the page. He didn't read it. He was too arrogant. He just folded it and shoved it into his pocket. "Thanks, Dad," he said, the sarcasm dripping from the word. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it? Now we can take care of everything for you. You have no idea," I thought as I watched him walk out the door. "You have no idea what you just signed up for." I sat back in my chair and took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but it tasted like victory. He had the paper he wanted, or so he thought. He would file it with his lawyer or the bank, and when he tried to use it, he would trigger a legal landmine that would blow his credibility to pieces. But I wasn't done. The war was just heating up. Bryce thought he had the keys to the kingdom. He was about to find out he had just locked himself in with the monster. I turned my attention back to my bills. I had to make sure the electricity stayed on. After all, I needed the power for the cameras I had hidden in the warehouse. Tonight, I had a feeling Bryce would make his next move, and I wanted to see every pixel of it in high definition. Wednesday morning started with a lie. I sat at the kitchen table nursing my third cup of coffee, watching Bryce adjust his silk tie in the hallway mirror. He was dressed like a man who ran empires. Italian suit-polished shoes and a leather briefcase that I knew contained nothing but a tablet and a sandwich. "I have a big pitch with the venture capitalists downtown," he announced loud enough for Kendra to hear from the living room. "They are very interested in my vision for the future. It was a performance, a bad one. Thanks to the keylogger I had installed on his computer, I knew the truth. Bryce didn't have a pitch. He didn't even have a company. His business license had been revoked 6 months ago for non-payment of fees. He was unemployed, drowning in debt, and desperate. But he kissed Kendra on the cheek, and she looked at him with stars in her eyes, believing every word. "Good luck, honey," she said. "Go get them." I said nothing. I just watched him walk out the door. As soon as his car engine roared to life, I pulled out my iPad. I wasn't tracking his stocks. I was tracking his location. I had slipped a GPS tag into the lining of his trunk the night before. The blue dot on my screen didn't head toward the financial district. It didn't go to the tech park. It headed south, toward the river, toward the rust belt of the city where the steel mills used to burn day and night. Bryce was going to the address he had stolen from my tax bill. He was going to warehouse number 4. I watched the blue dot navigate through the potholed streets of the industrial zone. This was not a place for a leased BMW. It was a place of corrugated iron chain link fences and stray dogs. I could imagine Bryce's face twisting in disgust as he drove past the abandoned factories. He probably thought he was driving into a wasteland. He didn't know that some of the most valuable things in the world are kept in the ugliest boxes. The dot stopped. He had arrived. I switched apps, opening the security feed from the external cameras at the warehouse. The video was crisp and clear, a sharp contrast to the decaying brick facade of the building. I saw Bryce step out of his car. He looked out of place like a peacock in a coal mine. He covered his nose with a handkerchief, looking around nervously. He wasn't looking for investors. He was looking for an entrance. He walked up to the main gate, pushing against the heavy iron. It was locked. He rattled it, his frustration visible even on the small screen. Then he saw the side door, the one I used. He marched over to it, confident that a simple kick or a picked lock would get him inside. He reached for the handle, but there was no keyhole. There was only a sleek black panel next to the door frame, a biometric scanner. It required a fingerprint and a retinal scan. State-of-the-art military-grade security disguised on a rotting door frame. Bryce froze. He stared at the scanner. He touched it and the red light blinked aggressively, denying him access. He stepped back, kicking the door in a fit of temper. He shouted something that the microphone didn't pick up, but I could read his lips. It was a curse word followed by my name. My phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Mercer. Mrs. Mercer is 70 years old. She is a retired logistics officer from the Army. She lives in a small apartment overlooking the warehouse lot, and I pay her to keep an eye on things. She is tougher than most men I served with. "Sir," she said, her voice calm and gravelly, "we have a visitor. He is driving a fancy car, and he is kicking your door. Do you want me to call the police, or should I go down there with my bat?" I smiled. "No police yet, Mrs. Mercer," I said, "and keep the bat in the closet. That is my son-in-law. He thinks he found a gold mine. He looks like he found a headache," she replied dryly. "He is trying to pry the scanner off the wall with his car keys. He is going to scratch the paint." "Let him try," I said. "That scanner is reinforced titanium. He will break his keys before he breaks that lock. Just watch him. If he manages to get inside, then you call me, but he won't get in. Not today." I watched on the screen as Bryce gave up. He was sweating now, his suit jacket discarded on the hood of his car. He paced back and forth, looking at the building with a hunger that made my skin crawl. He wasn't just curious, he was obsessed. He took out his phone and took pictures of the windows, the roof, and the ventilation shafts. He was casing the joint. He was looking for a weakness. Finally, he got back in his car. He slammed the door so hard the vehicle shook. He reversed out of the lot, spinning his tires in the gravel, sending a cloud of dust into the air. He was leaving, but he wasn't giving up. I knew that look. It was the look of a gambler who had lost a hand but was convinced the next card would make him rich. He wasn't going to the venture capitalists. And he certainly wasn't coming home. I checked the GPS again. He was heading north, but not toward our neighborhood. He stopped at a strip mall. I zoomed in on the map. He was parked in front of Ace Hardware. My stomach tightened. He wasn't going to buy paint. A man who thinks he is a CEO doesn't do home repairs. He was buying a solution to his problem. I waited an hour. When he finally pulled into my driveway, it was almost 5 o'clock. He walked into the house with his jacket over his shoulder and a heavy plastic bag in his other hand. The bag clanked as he set it down. "Hey, honey," Kendra called out from the kitchen. "How was the pitch?" Bryce walked in, wiping sweat from his forehead. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were manic. Incredible, he lied smoothly. "They love the concept. We are just working out the equity details. It might take a few days to get the paperwork signed, but we are close. Very close." He kissed her, then looked at me. I was sitting in the corner cleaning my glasses. "And what is in the bag?" Kendra asked, pointing to the heavy plastic sack. Bryce didn't blink. "Oh, just some plumbing supplies," he said. "I noticed the sink in the guest bathroom was draining slow. I picked up a few tools. I am going to fix it tonight. I want to pull my weight around here since your dad is letting us stay." He smiled at me. It was a cold, predatory smile. "That is very thoughtful of you, Bryce," I said, staring at the bag. He grabbed the bag and headed for the basement stairs. "I will just put these down in the workshop," he said. "Don't wait up for me. I might be working late on the pipes." As he passed me, the bag brushed against his leg. I saw the outline of the tool inside. It wasn't a wrench. It wasn't a plunger. It was a pair of 36-inch bolt cutters, heavy-duty, capable of snapping a hardened steel padlock like a twig. He wasn't fixing the plumbing. He was planning a break-in. I waited until I heard the basement door close. Then I looked at Kendra. She was humming to herself, happy that her husband was so successful and handy around the house. She had no idea that the man she loved was currently downstairs, sharpening the blades of a tool he intended to use to rob her father. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The storm was coming. I could feel it in my bones. Tonight, Bryce would return to the warehouse. He would use those cutters to bypass the biometric lock by attacking the old side gate I had intentionally left vulnerable. He thought he was smart. He thought he had found a back door. He didn't know that the back door led straight into the lion's den. I took out my phone and sent a text to Mrs. Mercer. One word, tonight. Then I went to my room and put on my boots. If Bryce wanted to play thief, I would play warden, and I would make sure that when the steel snapped tonight, it would be the sound of his future breaking in half. The rain started at 10 o'clock that night. It was not a gentle spring shower. It was a torrent that hammered against the slate roof of my house like a drum roll for an execution. I sat in my leather armchair in the corner of the living room, the lights off the curtains drawn. I was invisible in the shadows. On my lap, the screen of my iPad glowed with a faint blue light, the only illumination in the room. I was watching the dot on the map. The dot was Bryce. He had told Kendra he was going to bed early because his head hurt from all the strategizing. He claimed the stress of the impending deal was getting to him. Kendra had made him tea and kissed his forehead before going upstairs herself. She was asleep now, blissful and ignorant. But Bryce was wide awake. I heard the floorboards creak on the landing. It was a soft sound, but to my ears it was as loud as a gunshot. I watched the hallway mirror reflect a shadow moving toward the back door. Bryce was dressed for a heist in a bad movie. He was wearing black sweatpants, a black hoodie, and dark sneakers. He looked ridiculous, like a caricature of a criminal. In his right hand, he gripped the handle of the heavy canvas bag he had brought home earlier. I knew the bolt cutters were inside, wrapped in an old towel to stop them from clanking. He paused at the back door, his hand hovering over the deadbolt. He looked back toward the stairs, listening for any sound from Kendra. He did not look toward the living room. He did not look at the dark corner where I sat sipping my cold coffee. He thought I was asleep. He thought I was old and deaf and useless. He turned the lock. Click. The sound was swallowed by the thunder outside. He opened the door and a gust of wet wind blew into the kitchen. Then he was gone. I did not move. I did not run to the window. I simply looked down at my screen. The blue dot began to move across the driveway. I switched the view to the external security camera above the garage. I saw Bryce sprint to his car, his head ducked against the rain. He threw the bag into the passenger seat and climbed in. He didn't turn on the headlights immediately. He rolled down the driveway in neutral, using gravity to keep the engine silent until he hit the street. It was a smart move, but it was wasted on me. I wasn't sleeping. I was hunting. I waited until he turned the corner before I picked up my phone. I texted Mrs. Mercer. "The eagle has left the nest. Be ready." Then I poured another splash of bourbon into my coffee. The wait was the hardest part. I had to let him get there. I had to let him commit the crime. If I stopped him now, it was just a domestic dispute. If I stopped him at the warehouse, it was a felony. The drive took him 20 minutes. I watched every turn on the GPS tracker. He drove aggressively, speeding through yellow lights, swerving around slower cars. He was in a rush. Greed does that to a man. It makes him impatient. It makes him sloppy. He pulled into the industrial district, the streetlights becoming fewer and farther between. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the potholed roads into rivers of black water. He parked the car a block away from the warehouse, tucked behind a dumpster. He was trying to be stealthy. I switched to the warehouse perimeter cameras. The image was grainy in the low light, but the infrared sensors picked him up clearly. He looked like a ghost moving through the downpour. He approached the main gate first, but then remembered the biometric scanner. He didn't even look at it this time. He went straight for the side entrance, the old delivery gate that hadn't been used since 1998. This gate was secured by a heavy iron chain and a master lock. It looked formidable. To a layman, it looked impenetrable. But I knew that the chain was rusted on the inside, and the lock, while large, was susceptible to brute force if you had the right leverage. And Bryce had brought maximum leverage. He pulled the bolt cutters out of the bag. They were 36 inches long with red rubber handles. In the infrared light, they looked like a giant pair of jaws. Bryce looked around one last time, checking for police cars, checking for witnesses. There was no one. Just the rain and the rats. He positioned the jaws of the cutter around the shackle of the padlock. He took a deep breath. I could see the steam rise from his mouth. He squeezed. The lock resisted. It was hardened steel. Bryce grunted, his body straining against the metal. He adjusted his grip, planting his feet in the mud for better traction. He was sweating now, mixing with the rain on his face. He put his entire weight onto the handles, bouncing slightly. Snap. The sound was sharp and violent, loud enough to be heard over the storm. The shackle sheared off and fell into the mud. The chain rattled loose. Bryce dropped the cutters and grabbed the heavy iron gate. He pulled. The hinges screamed in protest, a high-pitched shriek of metal on metal that made my teeth ache. He pulled harder and the gate groaned open just enough for him to slip through. He was inside. My heart began to race, not from fear, but from anticipation. He had crossed the line. He was now officially trespassing on private property with intent to steal. But the trap wasn't just the building. The trap was what was inside. I tapped the screen, switching to the interior cameras. The warehouse was cavernous and dark. The only light came from the lightning flashing through the high skylights and the beam of the flashlight Bryce had just clicked on. The beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating towering shapes covered in heavy canvas tarps. Bryce moved quickly. He expected shelves of products. He expected crates of copper wire. He expected a safe full of cash. He ran to the nearest tarp and ripped it off. Underneath was not a stack of gold bars. It was the Mark I hydraulic pressure system, a massive engine prototype I had built in 1985. It was an ugly beast of cast iron and brass gears, grease-stained and imposing. It looked like a relic from the Industrial Revolution. Bryce stared at it. He shone the light all over it, looking for a control panel made of silver or a hidden compartment. He found nothing. He kicked the tire of the machine. He ran to the next tarp. He tore it down frantically. This was the solar array actuator, a delicate framework of aluminum and glass lenses. It looked like a giant robotic spider. Again, no cash, no quick liquidity. He began running down the aisles, tearing tarps off one by one. The Mark III turbine, the geothermal coupler, the variable transmission shaft, my life's work, my legacy. Every single machine in that room was a prototype that held a patent worth millions in royalties. But to the naked eye, to the uneducated eye of a gold digger, they looked like scrap metal. They looked like junk. I saw him stop in the center of the warehouse. He spun around, his flashlight beam dancing wildly against the walls. "Where is it?" he screamed. I heard his voice echo through the tablet speakers, tiny and tinny, but filled with rage. "Where is the money, you old fraud?" He fell to his knees. He grabbed a handful of dust and threw it. He had risked everything. He had lied to his wife. He had broken the law. He had severed his relationship with me. And for what? For a room full of rusty machines that he didn't understand. The disappointment broke him. But then the rage took over. A dangerous, blind rage. He stood up and grabbed the bolt cutters from the floor. "If I can't have the money," he shouted at the empty room, "then you can't have your trash." He swung the heavy tool like a baseball club. "No," I whispered to the empty living room. "Don't do it, Bryce." He didn't hear me. He swung the bolt cutters with all his strength, smashing them into the glass lenses of the solar array actuator. The sound of shattering glass was sickening. That prototype was one of a kind. It was the original model for the solar farms currently powering half of Nevada. He didn't stop. He moved to the hydraulic system. He jammed the jaws of the cutters into the exposed gear mechanism and twisted. I heard the crunch of precision-engineered teeth stripping away. He was destroying the intellectual property. He was murdering history. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I wasn't crying for the money. I was crying because Lucille had helped me calibrate that gearbox. She had stood in that cold warehouse holding the flashlight for hours while I adjusted the torque. He wasn't just breaking metal. He was breaking her memory. He moved to the third machine, the guidance gyroscope. It was a delicate instrument housed in a glass case. He raised the cutters high above his head, screaming like a banshee. Smash! The glass exploded. The brass rings bent. The delicate needle that had once pointed the way to a new era of aviation was crushed under the weight of his greed. I had seen enough. He had done more than break in. He had committed a crime against innovation. He had proved that he was not just a thief, but a vandal, a man who destroyed what he could not possess. I reached for the button on my screen, the button I had installed 3 days ago, the silent alarm. I pressed it. Instantly, the warehouse was flooded with blinding strobe lights. A siren began to wail, a deafening, ear-piercing sound that was designed to disorient and terrify. Bryce dropped the cutters. He covered his ears, stumbling back. He looked around wildly, his eyes wide with panic. The red and blue strobe lights painted him as exactly what he was, a criminal caught in the act. He tried to run. He scrambled toward the gate he had entered. But in his panic, he tripped over the very tarp he had ripped down. He fell hard, hitting his face against the concrete floor. He scrambled up, blood dripping from his nose. "Run, Bryce," I said to the screen, my voice cold and hard. "Run as fast as you can." He made it to the gate and squeezed through, vanishing into the rainy night. He left the bolt cutters behind. He left his dignity behind. And he left his freedom behind. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the precinct. I didn't call 911. I called the direct line of Detective Miller, an old friend from the Corps. "Hello, Ulysses," the detective answered, his voice thick with sleep. "It is 3 a.m. "I know," I said calmly. "I have a burglary in progress at my warehouse. The suspect has fled, but I have him on video. And detective, he left a weapon at the scene with his fingerprints all over it." "Who is it?" Ulysses the detective asked. I took a deep breath. "It is my son-in-law," I said. "And detective, make sure you bring a warrant. He is dangerous." I hung up the phone. I looked at the screen one last time. The warehouse was empty now, save for the flashing lights and the broken machines. My heart ached for the damage, but I knew it was a necessary sacrifice. I had traded metal for freedom. I had sacrificed the past to save Kendra's future. I closed the iPad. I finished my bourbon. Then I went upstairs to my room. I took off my clothes and put on my pajamas. I climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain. I needed to look like I had been sleeping when the police arrived. I needed to look like a heartbroken father, and that wouldn't be hard, because I was heartbroken, but I was also victorious. The trap had snapped shut, and tomorrow the skinning would begin. The sun came up on Thursday morning as if nothing had happened. The sky was a brilliant, insultingly bright blue, and the birds were singing in the oak tree outside the kitchen window. I sat at the head of the table eating my eggs and bacon with the slow, deliberate movements of a man who has nothing to hide. Across from me, Bryce was putting on a performance that deserved an Academy Award. He was wearing a fresh white shirt, but I could see the purple bruise blooming on his jawline where he had face planted onto the concrete floor of my warehouse 6 hours ago. He was moving stiffly, favoring his right leg, but he smiled at Kendra as she poured him orange juice. "Honey, what happened to your face?" Kendra asked, touching his chin gently. Bryce winced, but kept the smile plastered on. "I slipped in the shower." He lied, his voice smooth and practiced. "Clumsy me. I hit the soap dish. It is nothing." He looked at me, challenging me to contradict him. He thought he was safe. He thought that because he had escaped the warehouse before the police arrived, he was in the clear. He didn't know that Detective Miller was a man who preferred to serve warrants after his morning coffee. I took a bite of toast. "Be careful, Bryce," I said, my voice flat. "Slippery surfaces can be dangerous. You never know when the floor is going to come up and hit you." Bryce narrowed his eyes, but before he could respond, a heavy pounding shook the front door. It wasn't the polite knock of a neighbor. It was the authoritative, rhythmic thud of law enforcement. Kendra frowned, putting down the coffee pot. Who could that be this early? She walked to the door, but I stayed seated. I watched Bryce. He froze his fork, hovering halfway to his mouth. The color drained from his face, turning his skin a pasty gray. He knew. The door opened and I heard the deep baritone of Detective Miller. "Police, we have a warrant for the arrest of Bryce Miller." Kendra gasped. "A what? There must be a mistake." Miller walked into the kitchen, followed by 2 uniformed officers. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at Bryce. "Bryce Miller, stand up and put your hands behind your back. You are under arrest for breaking and entering grand larceny and malicious destruction of property." Bryce stood up, knocking his chair over. The crash echoed in the silent kitchen. Wait, this is crazy," he stammered, backing away until he hit the refrigerator. "I didn't do anything. I was here all night. Ask my wife. Kendra, tell them." Kendra rushed forward, placing herself between Bryce and the officers. Her hands were trembling. "Officer, please, my husband has been in bed all night. You have the wrong person. This is harassment." Detective Miller didn't blink. He stepped around Kendra and grabbed Bryce's wrist. He spun him around with professional efficiency. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and final. Click, click. Bryce yelped. Ouch, watch the arm. I am injured. We know, Miller said. We saw the video of you falling. You have the right to remain silent. I took another sip of coffee. The steam rose from the mug, swirling in the morning light. I watched the metal cuffs bite into the expensive fabric of Bryce's shirt. He wasn't a CEO anymore. He wasn't a visionary. He was just a criminal in my kitchen. The kitchen erupted into chaos. Kendra wasn't crying yet, she was screaming, a high-pitched sound of pure denial and rage. But she wasn't screaming at the police. She was screaming at me. She spun around, her eyes wide and wild. You did this? She shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at my face. You called them! You set him up! I put my coffee cup down slowly. I did not set him up, Kendra, I said calmly. He broke into my property. He destroyed my life's work, liar, she screamed. She grabbed Bryce's arm, trying to pull him away from the officers, as if she could physically unarrest him. He went there because he was worried about you. He told me he was going to check on the property because you are too old to manage it. He was trying to help and you turned it into a crime scene. Bryce seized the opportunity. He realized that the only way to save himself was to turn his wife against her father completely. He slumped his shoulders, putting on a face of tragic martyrdom. It is okay, Kendra, he said, his voice breaking theatrically. Let them take me. We knew this would happen. Your father has hated me from the day we met. Look at him. He is smiling. I wasn't smiling. My face was stone. He framed me. Bryce continued looking at the officers with wide, innocent eyes. I went there to inspect the building because I am the power of attorney for this family. I have the paperwork. The old man is senile and he forgot he gave me permission. And let us be honest here, officers. We all know why he really called you. He looked at me with pure venom. He hates that a white man married his daughter. He has been looking for an excuse to get rid of me since the wedding. This is a hate crime. He lured me there and now he is using his police buddies to lynch me legally. The accusation hung in the air like a foul smell. It was a low blow, a desperate attempt to weaponize race and history to cover his own greed. Kendra looked at me, and for the first time in her life, I saw hate in her eyes. Is that it, Dad? She asked, her voice dropping to a whisper that hurt more than the screaming. Is this about control? Is this because you can't stand that I am happy with someone who doesn't look like you? You are sick. You are a bitter, lonely old man, and I will never forgive you for this. She turned to the officers. I am his wife, and I am telling you he had permission to be there. This is a domestic dispute, not a crime. Uncuff him right now, or I will sue this entire department. Detective Miller looked at me. He needed me to speak. He needed me to break the silence. Kendra was trembling, vibrating with the force of her misguided loyalty. She was ready to burn down her relationship with me to save the parasite attached to her wrist. I felt a deep crack in my heart. I had raised her to be strong. I had raised her to be smart. But love had made her blind and Bryce had made her cruel. She was standing on the wrong side of the line, defending the wolf who was eating her inheritance. I knew words would not convince her. She was too far gone. She needed to see the monster with her own eyes. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out my iPad. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I simply unlocked the screen and opened the video file from the night before. I turned the volume up to the maximum. Watch, I said. I slid the iPad across the polished granite table. It stopped right in front of Kendra. On the screen, the black and white footage played in high definition. It showed Bryce not inspecting the building, but attacking it. It showed him wielding the bolt cutters like a madman. Kendra looked down. She tried to look away, but the sound drew her in. The sound of metal crunching against glass. The sound of Bryce screaming, "I will destroy it all." The video showed him smashing the solar lens. It showed him tearing the wires out of the hydraulic engine. It showed him kicking the delicate gyroscope until the glass casing shattered into 1,000 diamonds. That is not inspection, I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the video. That is hatred. That is what your husband does when he thinks no one is watching. Kendra stared at the screen. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She saw Bryce's face illuminated by the flashlight twisted in a rictus of pure, unadulterated greed and rage. She heard him curse my name. She heard him scream, "Where is the money?" Bryce tried to lunge for the iPad. "Turn that off," he shouted, struggling against the officers. "It is a deep fake." He edited it. "Don't look at it, Kendra." But Kendra was looking. She watched the moment the alarm went off. She watched her husband, the man she thought was a brave entrepreneur, turn into a coward, running and tripping over his own feet, leaving his weapon behind. The video ended. The kitchen was silent again. I looked at my daughter. I didn't see the hate anymore. I saw confusion. I saw the first cracks in the glass house she had built. "He didn't go there to help me, Kendra," I said softly. "He went there to steal. And when he didn't find gold, he decided to destroy my legacy. That is the man you married." Kendra looked up from the screen. She looked at Bryce. He was sweating profusely now, his facade of victimhood melting away to reveal the trapped rat underneath. "Baby, listen to me," he pleaded. Detective Miller tugged on the cuffs. "That is enough. Bryce Miller, let us go." They dragged him toward the door. Bryce was shouting now, throwing out threats and pleas, but he was small. He was small, and he was caught. Kendra stood in the middle of the kitchen. She didn't follow him. She didn't run to the car. She just stood there looking at the empty doorway. I picked up my toast. It was cold. I took a bite anyway. I looked at my daughter, but I offered no comfort. She had chosen her side. Now she had to stand in the wreckage. "I'm going to finish my breakfast," I said. "You should call a lawyer, Kendra. Not for him, for yourself." I didn't look at her again. I stared out the window at the beautiful blue sky, listening to the sound of the police car driving away, carrying the trash out of my life. But I knew this wasn't over. The snake had been caught, but the poison was still in the house, and Kendra was still infected. It took 6 hours for Kendra to drain her bank account. She did not ask me for the money. She knew better. She liquidated the emergency fund I had helped her build since she was 16, $25,000. That was the price of Bryce's freedom pending trial. It was money meant for a down payment on a house or a medical emergency. Instead, it went into the pocket of a bail bondsman downtown, a sunk cost that she would never see again. When they walked through the door, Bryce did not look like a criminal who had just spent the night in a holding cell. He looked like a wounded soldier returning from a war he did not start. He was limping slightly, favoring his right leg. He was rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been. Kendra was hovering over him like a nursemaid, holding his elbow, guiding him to the sofa as if he were a fragile piece of porcelain. I was sitting in the living room reading a book on thermodynamics. I did not look up. I wanted them to feel the weight of my silence. I wanted Kendra to feel the emptiness of her bank account every time she looked at me. Bryce collapsed onto the sofa, letting out a long, dramatic groan. He threw his head back against the cushions and closed his eyes. "Thank you, baby," he whispered to Kendra, his voice raspy and weak. "You saved my life in there. You are the only one who believes in me." Kendra sat beside him, stroking his hair. Her eyes were red from crying. "I got you," she said softly. "We will figure this out. We will fight this." I turned the page of my book. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. Bryce opened one eye and looked at me. There was no gratitude in his gaze, only calculation. He had lost the first round, but he was already planning the second. He realized that as long as I had legal control of my assets and my testimony, he was going to prison. He needed to discredit the witness. He needed to destroy my credibility before we even stepped into a courtroom. And he decided that the best way to do that was to declare me insane. He waited until I went to the kitchen to make tea. I heard him shifting on the sofa, leaning close to Kendra. His voice changed. It lost the weak, raspy quality and became low and urgent. The voice of a conspirator. "Kendra, we need to talk about your dad," he said. "Not now, Bryce," she replied. "You need to rest." "We do not have time to rest," he insisted. "Listen to me. You saw the video. You saw the way he looked this morning. He was eating toast while the police dragged me away. He did not even blink. That is not normal, Kendra. That is a lack of empathy. It is a classic sign of frontal lobe deterioration." I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter. He was playing the doctor now. "Think about it," Bryce continued. "Who puts military-grade security cameras in an empty warehouse full of junk? Who sets a trap like that for their own family?" He baited me, Kendra. He told me the lock was broken. He told me to go check on it. He wanted me to go there so he could trigger the alarm. He is creating scenarios in his head. He is paranoid. He thinks I am stealing from him. He thinks the government is watching him. It is dementia. Kendra was silent. I could hear her breathing. "He is dangerous," Bryce said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "Today it was me. Tomorrow it could be you. What if he forgets who you are? What if he thinks you are an intruder? He has guns in the house, Kendra. He is a retired Marine with a deteriorating mind. We have to protect him from himself, and we have to protect the family assets before he burns them all down or gives them away to some scammer. We need to file for conservatorship. We need to take control of his finances and his medical decisions. It is the only way to save him. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. Conservatorship. He wanted to strip me of my rights. He wanted to make me a child in the eyes of the law so he could spend my money without my permission. It was the ultimate theft. He wasn't just trying to steal my machines anymore, he was trying to steal my life. I walked back into the living room. Bryce stopped talking instantly. He grabbed his leg and winced, pretending to be in pain again. I looked at Kendra. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. She was listening to him. The seed had been planted. The next afternoon, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. It was not a police car. It was a Volvo. A man in a tweed suit stepped out carrying a leather bag. He looked kind. He looked professional. He looked like exactly the kind of man you hire when you want to politely lock your father away. I was in the garden pruning the roses. Kendra walked out to meet me. She looked nervous, wringing her hands together. "Dad," she said, her voice high and tight. "This is Dr. Evans. He is a specialist." I put down my shears. "A specialist in what, Kendra?" "Geriatric psychology," she said, rushing the words. "We just want to make sure you are okay. The stress of the break and the police coming to the house, it is a lot for anyone. We just want you to have a checkup. Just a conversation." I looked past her at the window. Bryce was standing there behind the curtains. He was smirking. He thought he had won. He thought I would refuse. He thought I would get angry and throw the doctor off my property, proving his point that I was hostile and unstable. Or he thought I would take the test and fail because he had convinced Kendra that my eccentricity was actually madness. Dr. Evans walked up to me, extending a hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. Stone. Your daughter tells me you have been under a lot of pressure lately. I would love to just sit and chat for a bit, maybe do a few simple cognitive exercises. It is completely standard." I wiped my hands on a rag. I looked at the doctor, then at Kendra. She looked terrified. She truly believed she was doing the right thing. She thought she was saving me. She didn't realize she was the weapon Bryce was using to execute me. I smiled, a calm, rational smile. "I would be happy to talk to you, doctor," I said. "I have nothing to hide. My mind is as sharp as it was the day I designed the guidance system for the Apollo project." Kendra let out a breath she had been holding. "Oh, thank God. Thank you, Dad." But I continued, raising a finger. "I have one condition." Dr. Evans tilted his head. "What is that, Mr. Stone?" I pointed at the window where Bryce was hiding. "If we are evaluating mental health in this house, we evaluate everyone. You want to test my memory and my cognitive function. Fine. But I want you to run a full toxicological and psychological screen on my son-in-law." Kendra frowned. "What? Why?" "Because," I said, my voice hardening, "a sane man does not break into a warehouse with bolt cutters thinking he will find gold. A sane man does not attack heavy machinery with a metal pipe screaming at the air. If I am being tested for dementia, he needs to be tested for narcotics and sociopathy." I looked Dr. Evans in the eye. "That is the deal. I sit for your test if he sits for yours. If you are really here to help the family, you will want to make sure everyone is safe." "Right." Dr. Evans looked uncomfortable. He adjusted his glasses. "Well, I suppose if Mr. Miller is willing, it would provide a more comprehensive picture of the household dynamic." I turned to the window. I knew Bryce could hear me. "What do you say, Bryce?" I called out. "You have nothing to hide, right? Just a simple checkup, unless you are afraid of what the blood test will show." Bryce stepped away from the window. He was trapped. If he refused, he looked guilty. If he agreed, he was finished. I knew for a fact that he had been using amphetamines to stay awake during his fake business nights. The keylogger on his computer had recorded his searches for same-day detox drinks. Kendra looked at the house, then back at me. She nodded slowly. "That is fair," she said. "If we are doing this, we are doing it for everyone. I will go get him." She walked into the house. I picked up my shears and snipped a dead bloom off the rose bush. The test was not going to be about my memory. It was going to be about his blood. And I knew exactly what they would find. Bryce had tried to paint me as the crazy one. But he had forgotten that in a battle of wits, you never challenge a man who builds chess computers for fun. I was ready for the doctor. I hoped Bryce was ready for the needle. The living room was silent enough to hear a pin drop when Dr. Evans opened the manila envelope. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the three of us sitting on the sofa like a panel of judges waiting for a verdict. I sat on the left, calm and collected. Kendra sat in the middle, wringing her hands until her knuckles were white. Bryce sat on the right, tapping his foot against the floor with a nervous energy that vibrated through the cushions. He thought he had me. He thought the test would prove I was a senile old man unfit to manage my own empire. He was wrong, Mr. Stone Doctor. Evans began looking directly at me. Your cognitive results are not just normal. They are exceptional. You scored in the 99th percentile for memory, logic, and spatial reasoning. In fact, your processing speed is faster than most men half your age. There is absolutely no evidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any cognitive decline. You are as sharp as a tack. Kendra let out a long breath, a sound that was half relief and half confusion. She looked at me, and for a second I saw a flicker of pride. But Bryce did not share her sentiment. He scoffed, crossing his arms. That is impossible, he muttered. He must have cheated. He memorized the answers. Dr. Evans ignored him. He reached back into the envelope and pulled out a second sheet of paper. This one had a red stamp on the corner. Now, regarding the toxicology screen, Dr. Evans continued, his voice growing stern. As agreed, we tested everyone. Mr. Stone is clean. Mrs. Miller is clean. However, Mr. Miller, we found some concerning anomalies in your sample. Bryce froze. What anomalies? I take allergy medicine. That is it. It was not allergy medicine, Dr. Evans said flatly. We tested the hair sample provided from the beanie cap found at the warehouse scene, which was confirmed to match your DNA. We also tested the blood draw from yesterday. Both samples tested positive for high levels of methamphetamine and synthetic opioids. These are not prescription levels, Mr. Miller. These are abuse levels. The room seemed to tilt. Kendra turned slowly to face her husband. Her eyes were wide with horror. Meth, she whispered. You told me you do not even drink coffee anymore. Bryce stood up, his face turning a blotchy red. This is a setup. The old man spiked my drink. Or the lab made a mistake. Do you know who I am? I am a CEO. I do not do drugs. Dr. Evans stood his ground. The hair follicle test goes back 90 days, Mr. Miller. Unless your father-in-law has been spiking your drinks for 3 months, this is a pattern of long-term usage. It explains the erratic behavior, the paranoia, and the aggression Mr. Stone described. You are not a victim of a senile man. You are an addict spiraling out of control. Bryce looked around the room like a trapped animal. He saw the judgment in the doctor's eyes. He saw the heartbreak in Kendra's eyes. And he saw the cold, hard truth in mine. He didn't say another word. He grabbed his car keys from the coffee table and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Kendra put her face in her hands and began to sob. I did not comfort her yet. The surgery was not over. We had removed the tumor's credibility, but now we had to cut off its blood supply. I stood up and thanked Dr. Evans, walking him to the door. Once he was gone, I went straight to my study. I did not sit down. I picked up the phone and dialed the private number of the bank manager, a woman I had known for 20 years. Sarah. It is, Ulysses, I said. It is time. Initiate the freeze, Ulysses. Are you sure, she asked. This will lock everything. Joint accounts, credit cards, even the emergency overdraft. Do it, I said. And Sarah flagged the secondary card holder as a fraud risk. I do not want him buying so much as a pack of gum on my dime. I hung up the phone. I imagined the invisible digital walls slamming down around Bryce. He was running, but he was about to hit a fence he could not climb. 5 miles away, Bryce was parking his car in front of a liquor store. I knew this because the GPS tracker was still active. He walked into the store, seeking the only comfort he knew. He grabbed a bottle of $200 single malt scotch. He walked to the counter, his head held high, trying to regain some shred of his shattered ego. He placed the bottle on the counter. He pulled out the platinum credit card, the one that bore my name, but which I had foolishly allowed him to carry for business expenses. The clerk swiped the card. Beep. Declined. Bryce frowned. Try it again. The chip is sensitive. The clerk swiped it again. Beep. Declined. Pick up card. Sir, the machine says I have to keep this, the clerk said, reaching for the plastic. Bryce snatched the card back. You will not keep anything. This is my card. Do you know who I am? The machine says it is reported stolen, sir. The clerk set his hand, moving toward the phone under the counter. You need to leave before I call the police. Bryce looked at the bottle of scotch, then at the clerk, then at the card in his hand. For the first time, he realized the power had shifted. He wasn't the one holding the keys anymore. He was just a junkie with no money and no way to get high. He threw the card at the clerk and ran out of the store empty-handed. Back at the house, the war was escalating. It was the next morning. The sun was shining, but the mood in the kitchen was dark. Bryce had not come home. Kendra had spent the night pacing the floor waiting for him to call. She was drinking coffee, her hands shaking when we heard the sound. Beep, beep, beep. It was the distinctive sound of a heavy truck backing up. Kendra ran to the window. "Oh my God," she screamed. "My car!" I walked to the window. A tow truck was in the driveway backing up to Kendra's white sedan. A man in a jumpsuit was already hooking the chains to the bumper. Kendra ran out the front door barefoot, screaming at the driver. "Stop! What are you doing? That is my car. I paid for it. It is not leased." The driver didn't stop. He looked at a clipboard. He looked tired. "Lady, I have a repossession order here." "Title loan default." "Title loan," Kendra shouted, grabbing the chain. "That is impossible. I have the title in the safe. I never took out a loan." The driver sighed and handed her a photocopy of a document. "Look, lady, I do not want trouble. The loan was taken out 3 months ago. $20,000 against the vehicle. High interest. No payments have been made. The name on the loan is Bryce Miller with power of attorney for Kendra Stone." Kendra froze. She stared at the signature at the bottom of the page. It was Bryce's handwriting, scrawled and messy. "He stole my title," she whispered. I walked out onto the porch carrying my laptop. I had been waiting for this. It was time for the final blow. "Kendra," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Come here." She turned to look at me, tears streaming down her face. "Dad, he sold my car." "He did not just sell your car." "Kendra," I said, opening the laptop. "He gambled it." I placed the computer on the porch railing. On the screen was the log from the keylogger I had installed on Bryce's computer. It was a list of every website he had visited in the last 90 days. It was a digital diary of a man destroying his life. "Look," I said, pointing to the dates. Kendra leaned in, wiping her eyes. She saw the entries. February 14th, Valentine's Day. While she was waiting for him at dinner, he was on https://www.google.com/searchq=royalflushpoker.com. Loss $5,000. March 3rd, the day he said he was buying stocks. quickcashloans.com. Application denied. April 10th, the day the car loan was taken out. High stakes, betting.net. Deposit $20,000. Balance 0. "He lost it all," I said. "The money you gave him for the business. The money from the car, the money he stole from my wallet. It did not go to investors. It went to a casino server in the Cayman Islands." Kendra stared at the screen. The reality washed over her like a tidal wave. The man she loved was not a visionary. He was not a victim. He was a leech. He had drained her dry and lied to her face every single day. She sank down onto the porch steps. She watched as the tow truck lifted her car into the air. The tires spun uselessly. It was a symbol of her marriage, suspended, helpless, and being dragged away because of a lie. I sat down next to her. I did not say "I told you so." I simply put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me, and for the first time in months, she did not pull away. She cried. She cried for the car, she cried for the money, but mostly she cried for the illusion that was dying right in front of her eyes. "He is not coming back, is he?" she asked, her voice small and broken. "No, honey," I said, watching the truck disappear down the street. "He is not. And if he does, we will be ready." I closed the laptop. The financial war was over. We had stopped the bleeding. But I knew Bryce. A man like that does not go quietly into the night. He was cornered, he was broke, and he was high. He was about to become the most dangerous thing in the world. A desperate man with nothing left to lose. And I was the only thing standing between him and the last thing he wanted. My house. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:00 in the afternoon on Friday. It was not the hesitant ring of a delivery driver or the polite ring of a neighbor. It was a firm, sustained press that announced business. Serious business. I was sitting in the living room polishing my reading glasses. Bryce was pacing the floor, nursing a glass of water because there was no alcohol left in the house, and his credit cards were dead plastic. Kendra was curled up on the armchair, staring at the wall, looking like a ghost of the vibrant woman she used to be. I stood up and walked to the door. I knew who was on the other side. I had called her the moment the tow truck left with Kendra's car. I opened the door to reveal Elena Rodriguez. Elena is not just a lawyer. She is a force of nature wrapped in a tailored navy blue suit. She stands 5 feet 2 inches tall, but she walks into a room like she owns the building. She was holding a black leather briefcase that looked heavy, not with paper, but with ammunition. "Hello, Ulysses," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "Hello, Elena," I replied, stepping aside. "Please come in. The jury is present." I led her into the living room. Bryce stopped pacing. He looked at Elena with immediate suspicion. He smelled the danger on her. A con man always knows when the law has walked into the room. "Who is this?" Bryce demanded, trying to muster some of his old arrogance but failing. "We do not need any more doctors, Ulysses. And we certainly do not need social workers." Elena did not look at him. She walked straight to the coffee table and placed the briefcase down with a heavy thud. The sound echoed in the silent room. She clicked the latches open. Snap, snap. "I am not a doctor, Mr. Miller," Elena said calmly. "I am the attorney representing the Stone Family Trust, and I am here to perform an autopsy." Bryce frowned. An autopsy? Nobody is dead. Elena looked up at him, her eyes dark and unyielding. "Not a body, Mr. Miller. An identity. We are here to dissect the life of the man calling himself Bryce Miller because according to the state of Nevada and the FBI database, that man does not exist." Kendra sat up straight, her eyes widening. "What do you mean he does not exist?" Elena reached into the briefcase and pulled out a stack of files 3 inches thick. She did not hand them to Bryce. She handed them to Kendra. "Read it, Mrs. Miller." Elena said softly, "Read it and weep, because the man standing in front of you is a ghost." Kendra took the file. Her hands were trembling so hard the papers rattled. She opened the first page. It was a mugshot, a black and white photo of a younger Bryce with shaggy hair and a defiant sneer. But the name under the photo did not say Bryce Miller. It said Barry Mitchum. Kendra looked up at Bryce. "Barry," she whispered. Bryce's face went white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Elena began to narrate the contents of the file. She spoke clearly and without emotion, letting the facts hit the air like hammer blows. "Subject, Barry Mitchum, born in Trenton, New Jersey," Elena recited. "Changed his name to Bryce Miller 4 years ago after serving 18 months in state prison for check fraud and identity theft. He moved to this state to escape parole violation charges." Liar, Bryce shouted, taking a step toward the table. "That is a fake. You photoshopped that." "Sit down, Bryce," I said. My voice was low, but it was the voice of a man who had commanded platoons. "Sit down or I will put you down." Bryce froze. He looked at my hands resting on my knees. He remembered the grip I had. He sat down on the edge of the sofa, his eyes darting around the room. Elena continued, ignoring the outburst. "Since changing his name, Mr. Mitchum has been busy. He has been married 3 times in the last 5 years." Kendra gasped. 3 times? You told me I was your first wife. You told me you were waiting for the right one." Elena pulled out 3 photographs and laid them on the table like tarot cards. "Meet Sarah Jenkins," Elena said, pointing to a photo of a woman in her 50s. She was a widow with a substantial life insurance payout. Mr. Mitchum married her in 2019. 6 months later, she filed for bankruptcy. He drained her savings to fund a non-existent tech startup. She pointed to the second photo. "This is Margaret Cole, a retired school teacher. He married her in 2021. He convinced her to mortgage her house to invest in a real estate opportunity. The opportunity was a scam. She lost her home. She is currently living in a state-subsidized facility." And finally, Elena pointed to the third photo. "This is Vivian Lee. She was the daughter of a wealthy antique dealer." Sound familiar? He married her 11 months ago. He tried to sell her father's inventory behind his back. When she caught him, he vanished. He filed for an annulment by forging her signature. Elena looked at Kendra, who was staring at the photos with a look of absolute horror. "He is a predator," Kendra, Elena said. "He targets women with assets or access to family wealth. He uses the same script every time. The charming entrepreneur, the misunderstood genius, the victim of a cruel world. He isolates them from their families. He takes control of their finances. And then when the money runs out, he leaves." I watched Bryce. He was not looking at the photos. He was looking at Kendra. He was calculating. He knew the facts were undeniable, but he also knew that Kendra was emotionally compromised. He knew that the heart often refuses to believe what the eyes see. Kendra looked up from the file. Her face was wet with tears. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Did you do this to those women? Are you doing this to me?" The room was silent for a long moment. Then Bryce laughed. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a loud, manic laugh that sent shivers down my spine. He stood up, clapping his hands slowly. "Bravo," he said, looking at me. "Bravo, Ulysses. I knew you were desperate, but I did not know you were this creative. How much did this cost you?" 10,000. 20,000. He turned to Kendra, dropping to his knees in front of her. He grabbed her hands before she could pull away. His eyes were intense, filled with a terrifying sincerity. "Kendra, look at me," he pleaded. "Do not look at those papers. Look at your husband. Do you really believe this? Do you really think I am some kind of monster? This is a setup. Your father has millions of dollars. He can hire people to create anything. He can fake police records. He can hire actors to pose in photos. He can bribe lawyers to come into our home and tell lies." He squeezed her hands tighter. "He hates me, Kendra. He has hated me since the moment I walked through that door because I am young, because I am white, and because I am not afraid of him. He wants to destroy us. He wants to keep you here in this house under his control forever. He is jealous of our love." Kendra looked at him, confusion swimming in her tear-filled eyes. "But the mugshot, Bryce. It looks exactly like you. The scar on the chin. It is a deep fake," Bryce insisted, his voice rising in desperation. "Anyone with a computer can make that. Look at the date. I was with you that year. Remember, we were dating." "You were not dating 4 years ago," I interrupted, my voice cutting through his lies. "You met 6 months ago." Bryce ignored me. He kept his eyes locked on Kendra, attempting to override her logic with pure emotion. "Baby, please," he said, tears forming in his own eyes. "I love you. I have made mistakes with money, yes. I have a gambling problem, yes. I admitted that. I am sick, and I need help. But I am not a criminal. I am not a bigamist. I am your husband. Are you going to let a jealous old man and a paid lawyer destroy our marriage, or are you going to stand by me?" Kendra looked at the file on the table. Then she looked at the man kneeling before her, the man she had promised to love for better or worse, the man who slept beside her. The cognitive dissonance was tearing her apart. She wanted to believe him because if she didn't, it meant her entire life was a lie. It meant she was just another victim in a line of victims, and that truth was too painful to accept in a single moment. She pulled her hands away from him, but she did not push him away. She looked at me, her eyes full of doubt. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "Is it possible? I mean, with AI and everything these days, is it possible these are fake?" I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Even with the evidence right in front of her, she was wavering. That was the power of a master manipulator. He had dug his claws in so deep that he had severed her connection to reality. Elena stepped forward, closing the file with a snap. "Mrs. Miller, these are court-certified documents. If they were fake, I would be disbarred and sent to prison. I am putting my career on the line to tell you the truth." Bryce stood up, turning on Elena. "Get out!" he screamed. "Get out of my house, you liar! I will sue you. I will sue you for defamation." He moved toward Elena, his fists clenched. He was trying to intimidate her. He was trying to physically force the truth out of the room. I stood up. I did not shout. I simply walked between Bryce and Elena. I am 6'2". Bryce is 5'10". I looked down at him. "You will not touch her," I said quietly. "And you will not sue anyone. Because, Barry, you have no money. You have no lawyer. And as of right now, you have no more time." Bryce backed away, breathing heavily. He looked at Kendra one last time. "Fine," he spat. "If you want to believe them, go ahead. But when you realize you threw away the love of your life for a stack of fake papers, do not come crawling back to me." He turned and stormed out of the living room, heading for the stairs. He was retreating to the bedroom, to the stronghold he had claimed. Kendra sat there staring at the photos of the women who looked just like her. Broken, bankrupt, betrayed. "I do not know what to believe," she whispered, closing her eyes. I sat down next to her. I did not touch her. I let the silence do the work. The seed of doubt had been planted by Bryce, but the tree of truth was already growing. and tonight I knew the storm would finally break the branches. Elena looked at me and nodded. She knew we had done enough. We had shown Kendra the monster. Now we had to wait for the monster to bite, and I knew he would. A rat like Barry Mitchum doesn't know how to stop chewing. He would try to take one last thing before he ran, and I would be ready. The thunder outside was loud, but the silence inside the house was heavier. It was 2 a.m. on Saturday. The storm that had started days ago was still battering the windows, matching the chaos that was consuming my home. I was in the kitchen, sitting in the dark, with a glass of water. I could not sleep. My instincts told me that the enemy was not done. Bryce was upstairs in the guest room, but I knew he was not sleeping either. I could hear his footsteps pacing back and forth like a caged animal. He was desperate. He was broke. His lies had been exposed by Elena, and his wife was looking at him with suspicion instead of adoration. A man like that does not accept defeat. He escalates. I checked the time on the microwave. 2:15. The floorboards above me creaked. Then I heard the heavy thud of boots on the stairs. Bryce was coming down. I did not turn on the lights. I stayed in the shadows of the breakfast nook, watching the doorway. Bryce entered the kitchen. He looked like a ghost. His skin was pale and clammy, and his eyes were wide and dilated. He was high again. The meth was burning through his system, stripping away his rationality and leaving only raw paranoia and aggression. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn yesterday, his shirt rumpled and stained with sweat. He did not see me at first. He walked straight to the counter, muttering to himself, "I need to leave. Just get the money and leave. She will understand later." He opened a drawer and rummaged through it. He pulled out a piece of paper. Even in the dim light, I recognized it. It was a quitclaim deed. He must have printed it at the library or stolen it from my office days ago. He placed it on the kitchen table and smoothed it out with a trembling hand. Then he saw me. I did not move. I just took a sip of water. "Jesus," Bryce hissed, jumping back and knocking a chair over. "You are like a demon. Why are you always watching me?" "I am watching my house, Bryce," I said, my voice low and steady. "What are you doing with that paper?" Bryce laughed, a high-pitched, jagged sound. This is my exit ticket. You are going to sign this, Ulysses. Right now. You are going to transfer the title of this house to Kendra. And since I have power of attorney over Kendra, I am going to sell it to a cash buyer at 9 a.m. this morning. I already have the contact. You do not have power of attorney, I reminded him, and you are not selling my home. Go back to bed. He shook his head violently. No. No more sleeping. No more waiting. I am done playing your games. You ruined everything. You turned Kendra against me. You brought that lawyer here. You froze my accounts. You owe me this house. It is compensation for the emotional distress you caused me. He walked toward me. He was trying to look menacing, but he looked pathetic. A child throwing a tantrum. But a child does not have the strength of a grown man fueled by amphetamines. Sign the paper, old man, he spat, slamming his hand on the table. Sign it, or I will burn this place down with you inside it. I stood up slowly. I pushed my chair back. I did not look at the paper. I looked at his hands. They were twitching. You need help, Bryce, I said. We can call a doctor. We can call a rehab center. But you are not getting this house. Rehab, he screamed. I do not need rehab. I need cash. I have people looking for me, Ulysses. Bad people. I owe them money. If I do not pay them by Monday, they are going to kill me. Do you understand? You are going to save my life whether you like it or not. So that was it. The gambling debts were not just numbers on a screen. They were attached to loan sharks. He was not just greedy. He was terrified. I am sorry you are in trouble, I said. But that is your burden, not mine. Bryce stared at me. His eyes went black. The fear turned into a cold, murderous resolve. Fine, he whispered. If you won't sign it willingly, I will make you sign it. He lunged for the knife block on the counter. My kitchen knives are German steel, high carbon, razor sharp. I keep them honed because I like precision in my cooking. Bryce grabbed the paring knife. It was small, only a 4-inch blade, but in close quarters it was lethal. It was the kind of knife you use to peel an apple or sever an artery. He turned back to face me, holding the knife low. His hand was shaking, but the blade was steady. Sit down, he commanded. Sit down and pick up the pen, or I will cut you. I swear to God, Ulysses, I will cut you and tell the police you attacked me. Who are they going to believe? The poor, injured son-in-law or the crazy old Marine with a history of violence? He stepped closer. The tip of the knife was inches from my stomach. I looked at the blade, then I looked at his face. He expected me to beg. He expected me to be a 68-year-old retiree with bad knees and a weak heart. He had forgotten who I was. He had forgotten that before I was an engineer, I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps. He had forgotten that I had spent 4 years in the jungle, where hesitation meant death. I took a breath. My heart rate did not spike. It slowed down. My vision narrowed. The kitchen disappeared. The table disappeared. There was only the threat and the neutralization of the threat. "Drop the knife, son," I said softly. "No." Bryce screamed. He lunged. It was a clumsy strike, a desperate overhand stab aimed at my chest. He telegraphed the move, shifting his weight before he swung. I did not step back. I stepped in. I moved inside his guard, my left arm rising in a hard block to intercept his forearm. Bone met bone with a sickening thud. The impact stopped his momentum instantly. Bryce grunted in shock. He tried to pull back, but I was already moving. Krav Maga is not about looking pretty. It is about efficiency. It is about ending the fight in seconds. My right hand shot out and gripped his wrist, the one holding the knife. I squeezed. My grip strength was forged by 40 years of turning wrenches and lifting steel. I felt the tendons in his wrist grind together. Bryce screamed. He tried to kick me, but I stepped on his foot, pinning him to the floor. I twisted his wrist outward against the natural rotation of the joint. It is a simple lever. The body must follow the wrist or the wrist will break. Bryce's knees buckled. He was forced down. "Drop it," I commanded. He refused. He was fighting with the strength of a junkie. He tried to bite my arm. I increased the pressure. I rotated his arm behind his back, forcing his face down onto the kitchen table. The same table where we had eaten breakfast. The same table where he had tried to trick me. I slammed his hand against the granite surface. Once. Twice. The knife clattered onto the floor, spinning away under the refrigerator. I did not let go. I pushed his face into the cold stone. I brought my elbow down on the pressure point in his shoulder. His legs gave out completely and he collapsed onto the floor. I followed him down, keeping the arm lock tight. I placed my knee in the center of his back. "Stay down," I growled into his ear. "Do not move. Do not breathe." Bryce was sobbing now. "My arm. You broke my arm. You crazy bastard, get off me. You brought a knife to a fistfight, boy," I whispered. "You tried to kill me in my own kitchen. You crossed the line." I held him there, pinned like a butterfly in a display case. I could feel his heart hammering against the floorboards. I could smell the sour fear coming off him. He was not a tough guy. He was a bully who crumbled the moment he met real resistance. I looked up. The kitchen was still dark, but the hallway light had been turned on. Standing at the entrance of the kitchen was Kendra. She was wearing her silk pajamas, the ones she had worn on her wedding day. Her hair was messy from sleep. Her face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. She was looking at us. She saw her father, the man she called old and frail, kneeling on the back of her husband. She saw Bryce's face pressed against the tiles, distorted by pain and rage. But most importantly, she saw the knife. The stainless steel blade was gleaming under the refrigerator light just a few feet away from Bryce's outstretched hand. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible over the sound of the rain. I did not move. I did not release the hold. I looked at my daughter. "Call the police, Kendra," I said. My voice was calm, flat, and devoid of emotion. Kendra took a step forward. Her eyes darted from me to Bryce. "Baby, help me!" Bryce screamed from the floor. "He is trying to kill me. He attacked me. He is crazy. Get the gun. Shoot him." Kendra stopped. She looked at Bryce. She heard him tell her to shoot her own father. Then she looked at the knife again. She saw the direction it was pointing. She saw the open drawer where the knives were kept. She saw the quitclaim deed on the table, the paper that Bryce had been forcing me to sign. The pieces fell into place. The final shattered fragments of her denial were swept away. She realized that the man screaming on the floor was not a victim. He was an executioner who had failed. She looked at me. "Dad, are you hurt?" she asked. "I am fine," I said. "Call 911. Tell them we have an intruder. Tell them he is armed and dangerous. But he is my husband." Kendra sobbed. "No, Kendra," I said, looking straight into her soul. "A husband protects you. A husband protects your home. This man just tried to stab me so he could sell the roof over your head. That is not a husband. That is a parasite." Kendra looked at Bryce one last time. Bryce looked back at her, his eyes pleading. Kendra, baby, please. Do not listen to him. Kendra closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She reached for the phone on the wall. She lifted the receiver. Her hand was shaking, but her voice was strong. 911, she said into the phone. I need police. My address is 42 Oak Street. My husband just tried to kill my father. Bryce let out a howl of despair. It was over. The gaslighting was over. The manipulation was over. He had played his final card, violence, and it had backfired spectacularly. I kept my knee on his back, waiting for the sirens. I felt no joy in this victory, only a deep, tired sadness. I had saved my life, and I had saved my house. But I had to break my daughter's heart to do it. And that was a price no father should ever have to pay. But as I looked at the knife on the floor, I knew I had no choice. It was him or me. And I had promised Lucille I would always be there to protect our little girl, even if I had to protect her from the man she loved. I lifted my knee from his back and stepped away, keeping my eyes locked on his hands. Bryce did not spring up to attack me again. Instead, he collapsed into a heap on the kitchen tiles, curling into a fetal position. He began to sob. It was a wet, pathetic sound that echoed off the granite countertops. He was pivoting. The violence had failed, so now he was returning to the only weapon he had left, which was emotional manipulation. He crawled across the floor toward Kendra, dragging his legs as if he were paralyzed by grief rather than exhaustion. He reached out with his good hand, trying to grab the hem of her silk pajama pants. Baby, please, he wailed, his voice cracking. You have to understand, I am not a violent man. I am sick. The pressure, it is too much for one man to take. The debt collectors, they threatened to hurt you, Kendra. They said they would come for you if I did not pay by Monday. I was trying to save you. I grabbed the knife because I was scared. I was out of my mind with fear for your safety. He looked up at her, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat and grime from the floor. I did it for us, he pleaded. I love you so much it makes me crazy. Do not look at me like that. Do not look at me like I am a monster. I am just a husband who is drowning. Help me, Kendra. Please help me. He tried to bury his face in her legs. He was playing the victim perfectly. He was banking on her nurturing nature, on the years of love she had poured into him. He wanted her to see a wounded bird that needed to be nursed back to health. He wanted her to forget that 30 seconds ago that wounded bird had been holding a 4-inch blade to her father's stomach. I stood by the counter, rubbing my throbbing wrist, and waited. I could not interfere. If I spoke now, he would twist it. He would say I was keeping them apart. This had to be Kendra's choice. She had to decide between the man crying on the floor and the truth standing right in front of her. Kendra did not move. She did not reach down to comfort him. She did not stroke his hair. She stood as still as a statue, looking down at the man she had married. Then she looked at me. She saw me leaning against the counter, breathing heavily. She saw the red marks on my arm where Bryce had tried to bite me. She saw the way I was cradling my wrist, the wrist I had used to stop a murder. She looked at the knife lying under the refrigerator. The metal glinted in the shadows, a silent witness to the intent of the man on the floor. She looked back at Bryce. For the first time, she did not see her husband. She saw a stranger. She saw the drugs in his system. She saw the lies about the business. She saw the theft of her car. And finally, she saw the violence. The illusion shattered completely. The glass house fell down. She took a step back, pulling her leg away from his grasp. Bryce's hand fell to the floor empty. Kendra, he whispered, sensing the shift. Baby, do not call me that, she said. Her voice was cold. It was dead. She turned her back on him. She walked past me without saying a word. She walked down the hallway to the heavy oak front door. She unlocked the deadbolt. She threw the door wide open. The storm outside was raging. The wind howled, pushing rain into the entryway, soaking the expensive rug. The thunder cracked, shaking the foundation of the house. Kendra stood by the open door. She pointed into the darkness. Get out, she said. Bryce froze. He stopped crying. He looked at her, trying to process the command. What? He stammered. It is raining. I have nowhere to go. Kendra, you can't be serious. I said get out, she repeated louder this time, screaming over the wind. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. If you are not out in 10 seconds, I am letting Dad call the police and I will testify against you. I will tell them everything. I will tell them about the drugs. I will tell them about the knife. Bryce looked at her face. He saw the resolve there. He saw the same steel that I carried in my blood. He realized that the well had run dry. There was no more pity to be mined. There was no more love to be exploited. He slowly stood up. The transformation was instant and terrifying. The tears vanished as if a faucet had been turned off. The slump in his shoulders disappeared. The look of agony on his face smoothed out into a mask of cold, hard arrogance. He brushed the dust off his knees. He fixed his collar. He ran a hand through his messy hair. He was no longer the weeping husband. He was the con man. He was Barry Mitchum. He looked at me with a sneer. Then he walked toward the door. He stopped right in front of Kendra. He was close enough to kiss her, but instead, he leaned in and smiled. A cruel, shark-like smile. "Fine," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of any emotion. "I will leave. But you are making a mistake, Kendra. A very expensive mistake." He stepped out onto the porch, but he didn't run into the rain. He turned around, framing himself in the doorway against the lightning. "You think you can just kick me out?" he said, laughing softly. "You think a divorce is just signing a paper? You are wrong. We are married, Kendra. In the state of Nevada, that means community property. Everything you own, I own." He pointed a finger at her face. "I own half of your savings," he listed, counting on his fingers. "I own half of your retirement fund. And thanks to the way your father set up the deed transfer years ago, I own a claim on half of this house." He looked at me over Kendra's shoulder, his eyes gleaming with malice. "That is right, old man," he shouted. "I looked up the records. You put Kendra on the deed in 2010. That makes this house a marital asset. I'm going to sue you. I am going to drag this out in court for years. I will take 50% of everything. I will bleed you dry with legal fees. By the time I am done with you, you will be living in a cardboard box, and I will be drinking champagne on a yacht paid for by the sale of this dump." He buttoned his jacket, shielding himself from the wind. "So go ahead," he said. "Call the police. File for divorce. You are just doing the paperwork for me. I am leaving now, but my lawyer will be in touch on Monday. And trust me, he is going to ask for a lot more than just the car." He winked at Kendra, a soulless gesture that made her flinch. "See you in court, sweetie," he said. He turned and walked into the rain. He did not run. He walked with the swagger of a man who believes he has already won the war even if he lost the battle. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving us standing in the open doorway with the storm blowing into our sanctuary. Kendra slammed the door shut. She leaned her back against it, sliding down until she hit the floor. She buried her face in her hands and began to scream. It was a scream of pure frustration and terror. "He is going to take the house," she sobbed. "Dad, he is right. He is going to take everything." I walked over to her. I knelt down and pulled her into my arms. I let her cry. I let her feel the fear, because she needed to feel it to understand what we had to do next. Bryce thought he knew the law. He thought he knew the records. He thought he had found a loophole. But he had missed one thing. He had missed the trap I had set 12 years ago. A trap designed exactly for a moment like this. "Let him sue Kendra," I whispered, stroking her hair. "Let him try. He thinks he is playing chess. But he does not know that the board is rigged." I looked at the closed door. I could still feel his presence out there in the dark, plotting and scheming. But for the first time in weeks, I was not worried. I was ready. He wanted a legal battle. I would give him a legal execution. Kendra was trembling in my arms, her sobs echoing in the hallway. She was terrified not of the man who had just left, but of the threat he had left behind. She believed him. She believed that the legal system would reward his greed. She believed that she was about to lose the only home she had ever known to a man who had tried to stab her father. I held her tight, but I was not looking at her. I was looking past the open door into the rain where Bryce was walking toward his car. He was moving slowly, savoring his moment of triumph. He thought he had crushed us. He thought he had the upper hand because he knew how to exploit the laws of marriage. But he had forgotten one thing. He was playing a game of checkers while I had been playing three-dimensional chess for 20 years. "Kendra, listen to me," I said, pulling back so I could look into her eyes. "Stop crying. He is not going to take the house. He is not going to take a single dime." Kendra shook her head, her eyes wide with panic. "You heard him, Dad. He is right. Nevada is a community property state. He has a claim. He will drag us through court until we are bankrupt." "No, he won't," I said calmly. I walked over to the side table and picked up my tea, which was still warm. I took a sip. I needed the caffeine because the night was far from over. I walked to the doorway. Bryce had reached his car. He was fumbling with the door handle, his hands slippery from the rain. "Bryce," I called out. My voice was not loud, but it carried through the storm with the weight of a command. "Don't leave yet. You forgot something." Bryce stopped. He turned around, his face wet and twisted into a smirk. "What is it, old man? Do you want to beg? Do you want to offer me a settlement to keep me quiet? It is too late for that. The price just went up." I stepped onto the porch. The wind whipped my clothes, but I stood firm. "I did not want to beg," I said. "I wanted to save you the cost of a lawyer. Because if you sue us, Bryce, you are going to be suing a ghost." Bryce laughed, walking back toward the porch steps. He could not resist the urge to gloat. He wanted to hear me admit defeat. He walked right back into the spider web. "What are you talking about?" he asked, crossing his arms. "I checked the county records, Ulysses. The deed lists Kendra Stone as a co-owner. That is public record. You can't hide it." "You are right," I said. "Kendra is listed. But you did not read the fine print, did you? You did not check who the primary lien holder is." Bryce frowned. "The house is paid off. There is no mortgage." "There is no bank mortgage," I corrected him. "But there is a lien. A very specific legal structure that my late wife Lucille and I set up 25 years ago. You see, Bryce, we knew that one day our daughter might fall in love with the wrong man. We knew that someone might try to take advantage of her kindness. So we created a fail-safe." I looked at Kendra, who was standing in the doorway listening intently. "The house does not belong to me, Kendra," I said softly. "And it does not belong to you. It belongs to the Ulysses Stone Irrevocable Trust. We transferred the ownership when you were 3 years old. We are merely the trustees. We have the right to live here, but we do not have the right to sell it, give it away, or lose it in a divorce settlement." Bryce's smirk began to fade. "A trust," he scoffed. "That does not matter. A judge can pierce a trust if it is used to hide marital assets." "Not this trust," I said. "This trust has a very special clause. Clause 14B. We call it the character clause." I looked directly at Bryce. "The clause states that the beneficiary, which is Kendra, receives a monthly stipend and the right to reside in the property only as long as she maintains the code of conduct specified by the grantors, and there is a specific stipulation regarding marriage." I took another step forward. The rain was hitting my face now, but I did not blink. "The stipulation says that if the beneficiary marries an individual with a felony record, a history of fraud, or a documented addiction, and fails to report this to the Board of Trustees, immediately the trust is automatically suspended. All assets are frozen. The right to residency is revoked, and most importantly, the beneficiary is disinherited until the marriage is dissolved." The color drained from Bryce's face faster than the rain washing down the driveway. He stood there, mouth open, water dripping from his nose. He was doing the math in his head. He was realizing that the community property he was drooling over was legally untouchable. "You are lying," he whispered. "That is not legal." "It is ironclad," I said. "My lawyer, Elena, wrote it. And guess what, Bryce? Since you have a record for identity theft and a current addiction to methamphetamines, you fit the description perfectly. The moment you married Kendra without disclosing your past, you triggered the clause. Technically, Kendra does not own $1 to her name right now. She is destitute, which means half of her assets equals exactly 0. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. He had spent months manipulating Kendra. He had plotted, he had stolen, he had gambled, he had even committed violence, all for a payday that did not exist. He had just robbed a vault that was empty. "You mean," he stammered, his voice trembling with rage, "you mean I get nothing?" I smiled. A cold, hard smile. "You get exactly what you earned, Bryce," I said. "You get the debt, you get the criminal charges, and you get a wife who now knows exactly what you are. You tried to marry a bank account, but you forgot to check if the vault door was open." Bryce looked at Kendra. She was staring at him not with fear anymore, but with pity. She realized that her father had protected her in ways she never understood. She realized that the walls I built around her were not to keep her in, but to keep monsters like him out. "You tricked me!" Bryce screamed. His voice cracked, breaking under the weight of his shattered ego. "You tricked me into marrying her. Nobody tricked you," Kendra said, stepping forward. Her voice was strong. "You tricked yourself, Bryce. You saw what you wanted to see. You saw money. You never saw me. Bryce looked between us. The logic of the situation was gone. The hope of money was gone. All that was left was the raw, animalistic rage of a narcissist who has been exposed. The mask fell off completely. "I will kill you," he shrieked. He did not run to his car. He did not run away. He lunged. He flew up the porch steps, his hands reaching for my throat. He was screaming incoherent curses, his face purple with fury. He wanted to destroy the man who had outsmarted him. He wanted to silence the voice that was telling him he was a failure. I did not move. I did not raise my hands to fight him. I did not need to, because I had made a call 10 minutes ago, before I even entered the kitchen to confront him. As Bryce reached the top step, blue and red lights exploded in the darkness behind him. A siren wailed, cutting through the sound of the thunder. Bryce froze mid-stride. He turned around, his hands still raised in claws. 3 police cruisers skidded into the driveway, blocking his BMW. The doors flew open and officers poured out, weapons drawn. Police dropped to the ground, a voice boomed over the loudspeaker. Bryce looked at the police, then he looked at me. "You called them," he whispered. "You called them before we even fought." "I always have a backup plan, son," I said, taking a sip of my tea. Bryce stood there for a second, hesitating. He looked at the gap between the cars. He was thinking about running. He was thinking about fighting. But then he saw the shotgun in the hands of the lead officer. He crumpled. He dropped to his knees on the wet concrete of the porch. He put his hands behind his head. He surrendered, not because he was sorry, but because he was a coward. Kendra watched as the officers rushed up the steps. They grabbed Bryce, throwing him face down into a puddle. They cuffed him roughly, reciting his rights in a monotone voice that clashed with the chaos of the night. I watched them drag him away. He was kicking and screaming now, shouting about how he would sue the department, how he was a victim of a conspiracy. But nobody was listening. He was just another criminal caught in the act. I walked over to Kendra. She was shivering. I put my arm around her and led her back inside the house. "It is over," I said, closing the heavy oak door, shutting out the storm and the sirens. The trust did its job. Kendra looked at me. Tears were streaming down her face again, but they were different tears. They were tears of relief. "Did Mom really write that clause?" she asked, wiping her eyes. I smiled, walking toward the kitchen to pour her a cup of tea. "She did," I said. "Lucille always said that love is blind, but a trust fund should have 20/20 vision." We sat in the kitchen listening to the police radio chatter outside. The house was quiet again. The threat was gone. But I knew the recovery would be long. Kendra had lost a husband, but she had regained her freedom, and I had kept my promise to Lucille. I had protected our greatest treasure. Not the money, but our daughter. The wheels of justice usually turn slow, grinding down the lives of those caught in the gears. But in the case of the state versus Bryce Miller, the wheels spun with a terrifying speed. It was only 3 weeks after the incident in my kitchen. We sat in the courtroom on hard wooden benches that made my old back ache. The room smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat on the aisle. Kendra sat next to me, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. In a way, she was. She was burying the last 3 years of her life. Bryce was brought in through the side door. He was not wearing his Italian suits. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight. His hair was shaved off, revealing the shape of his skull, making him look harder and yet more fragile. He scanned the room, looking for a friendly face. He looked at Kendra. He smiled a weak, desperate smile, hoping to trigger some muscle memory of affection in her. Kendra did not blink. She looked through him as if he were made of glass. His lawyer was a man named Mr. Henderson. He was a public defender with a frayed collar and a briefcase that looked like it had survived a war. He was overworked and underpaid, and he had met Bryce exactly 10 minutes before the bailiff called the court to order. Bryce had tried to fire him. He had demanded a high-powered defense team. But when he tried to access his funds, he found nothing but frozen accounts and debt. He was a pauper now, dependent on the state he had tried to cheat. The trial was a bench trial, meaning there was no jury. Just Judge Harrison, a woman with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every lie a criminal could invent. She looked at Bryce with bored indifference. Mr. Henderson stood up. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty by reason of temporary insanity induced by financial stress. He claims he was under duress and not in control of his faculties. It was a weak defense. A Hail Mary pass thrown by a man with no arm strength. Elena Rodriguez, my attorney, was sitting with the prosecution assisting the district attorney. She stood up. She did not look bored. She looked like a predator who had smelled blood. Your Honor, the prosecution will prove that this was not insanity. This was a calculated series of felonies committed by a career criminal who has made a living preying on women and the elderly. We have video evidence, we have financial records, and we have the defendant's own words. The trial moved quickly. The video of the warehouse break-in was played. The judge watched Bryce swinging the bolt cutters, destroying millions of dollars of NASA prototypes. She watched him run like a coward. Bryce sank lower in his chair, avoiding the screen. Then came the testimony of Dr. Evans regarding the toxicology report. Methamphetamine. Opioids. The judge took notes, her face tightening in disgust. But Bryce was still holding on to a shred of hope. He leaned over to his lawyer, whispering frantically. I could read his lips. He was saying, "She won't testify against me. She loves me. It is spousal privilege." He was right about one thing. Kendra did not want to testify. The law in Nevada protects spouses from being forced to testify against each other in certain situations. Bryce was banking on her silence. He thought that if she stayed quiet, he could claim the assault in the kitchen was self-defense, that I had attacked him first. But Elena had anticipated this. She did not need Kendra to speak. She had something better. Your Honor, Elena said, walking to the center of the room. The defense claims Mr. Miller loves his wife and acted out of stress. To counter this character assertion, the prosecution would like to submit Exhibit G. She pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. This is a recording recovered from the defendant's cloud account. It is a phone conversation recorded 2 days before the warehouse incident. It is a call between Mr. Miller and an unidentified female associate. Bryce's head snapped up. His eyes went wide with genuine terror. He tried to stand up. No, he shouted. You can't play that. That is private. That is inadmissible. Sit down, Mr. Miller. Judge Harrison barked, banging her gavel. Overruled. Play the tape. The courtroom fell silent. Elena pressed a button on the laptop. The speakers crackled. Then Bryce's voice filled the room loud and clear. It was arrogant. It was mocking. It was the voice of the man he really was. Hey, baby, the voice on the tape said. Yeah, I am still at the house. It is a nightmare. The old man is watching me like a hawk. But don't worry, I am close to the payday. A woman's voice laughed on the other end. How is the wife? Is she suspicious? Bryce's voice laughed back. A cold, cruel sound. Kendra, please. She is a cow. A stupid, desperate milk cow. I snap my fingers and she moos. She believes anything I tell her. I told her I was fixing the plumbing and she looked at me like I was Superman. God, she is pathetic. I can't stand touching her. Every time I kiss her, I have to think about the money. Just a few more days, baby. Once I get the old man to sign the house over, I am dumping her at the nearest shelter. We will be in Rio by the weekend. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was heavier than lead. I looked at Kendra. She was sitting perfectly still. Her hands were folded in her lap. Tears were streaming down her face, hot and fast, dripping onto her black dress. But she did not make a sound. She did not wipe them away. Her face was not twisted in sorrow. It was frozen in a mask of absolute icy realization. She had heard the insults. She had heard him call her a cow. She had heard him say he was repulsed by her touch. At that moment, the last tiny ember of love she held for him was extinguished. It was stomped out by his own words. Bryce refused to look at her. He stared at the table, his face burning red. He knew there was no coming back from this. No lie could cover it. No manipulation could spin it. He had been stripped naked in front of the world. Mr. Henderson, the public defender, closed his file. He looked at his client with open disdain. He knew the case was over. He did not even try to object. Judge Harrison removed her glasses. She looked at Bryce Miller for a long time. The silence stretched out for an eternity. Mr. Miller, she began, her voice low and dangerous. I have sat on this bench for 20 years. I have seen murderers, thieves, and liars. But rarely have I seen a man so completely devoid of moral character. You did not just break the law. You broke a family. You targeted a woman who loved you and you used her like a tool. You destroyed history and innovation out of a temper tantrum. You are a danger to society not because you are violent, though you are, but because you have no soul. She looked down at her papers. For the charge of grand larceny and the malicious destruction of property valued over $1 million, I find you guilty. For the charge of fraud and identity theft, I find you guilty. For the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, I find you guilty." Bryce began to shake. "No," he whispered. "Please, I need help. I am an addict. Send me to rehab." "Rehab is for people who want to get better," Judge Harrison said. "Prison is for people who refuse to be human." She raised the gavel. "Bryce Miller, I sentence you to 8 years in the state penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served at least 85% of your sentence, and upon release you will be subject to a permanent restraining order regarding Ulysses and Kendra Stone." Bang! The gavel hit the wood with a sound that signaled the end of the war. 8 years. Bryce let out a sound that was half scream and half sob. 8 years, he shouted, jumping up. "You can't do this. I have rights." Kendra, help me. Tell them I am a good man." 2 bailiffs moved in. They grabbed Bryce by the arms. He struggled, kicking his feet like a child. "Kendra, look at me," he screamed as they dragged him toward the side door. "I am your husband. You can't let them take me." Kendra stood up. She turned slowly toward him. She wiped the tears from her face. Her eyes were dry now. They were hard. They were stone eyes. She looked at him, and for the first time in months, she spoke to him with her own voice, not the voice he had programmed her to use. "Goodbye, Barry," she said. She used his real name, the name of the criminal, not the name of the husband. Bryce stopped struggling. He stared at her, mouth open. The bailiffs shoved him through the door and he vanished into the corridor. The heavy door slammed shut, cutting off his final plea. The courtroom was quiet. Elena Rodriguez leaned over and squeezed my hand. "It is done, Ulysses." I nodded. My chest felt lighter. The weight I had been carrying since the wedding day was gone. Justice had been served. It was not sweet. It was not happy, but it was necessary. I stood up and offered my arm to my daughter. "Are you ready to go home?" I asked. Kendra looked at the empty chair where Bryce had sat. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the courtroom one last time. "Yes, Dad," she said, taking my arm. "Let us go home." We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The storm was over. The air was clean. Kendra did not look back. She walked with her head held high. She was wounded, yes. She had scars that would take years to heal, but she was free. And as I walked beside her, I knew that we would be okay. We were stones. We did not break. We endured. But the story does not end with a gavel, because while Bryce was locked away, the warehouse was still standing. And inside that wreckage lay the truth of what I had been protecting all along. The final lesson I had to teach my daughter was not about money or law. It was about value. And to teach her that I had to show her what was inside the machines Bryce had tried to kill. The drive home from the courthouse was the longest journey of my life. The silence in the car was heavy, not with tension, but with a sorrow so deep it felt like a physical weight pressing down on our chests. I kept my eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. Beside me, Kendra stared out the window, watching the familiar streets of our neighborhood pass by. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. The vibrant, confident woman who had defended her husband against the police was gone. In her place sat a girl who had been broken by the truth. We pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same as it always did. The roses were blooming, the grass was green, and the front porch was swept clean. But to us it felt different. It felt like a battlefield where the smoke had finally cleared, revealing the casualties. We walked inside and the emptiness of the house hit us. Bryce's things were gone. His noise was gone. His chaos was gone. But the ghost of his betrayal lingered in every corner. Kendra walked into the kitchen and stood by the island, the exact spot where he had tried to attack me. She ran her hand over the granite countertop as if checking for cracks. Then she stopped. Her shoulders began to shake. It started as a small tremble and grew into a violent shudder. She turned to me, her face wet with fresh tears, her eyes red and swollen. "Dad," she choked out. "I am so sorry." I walked over to her, but she held up a hand, stopping me. She needed to say this. She needed to get the poison out. "I am so sorry," she repeated, her voice cracking. "You tried to tell me. You tried to show me the bills, the records, the lies. And I didn't listen. I treated you like an enemy. I let him humiliate you in your own home. I let him steal from you. I almost let him kill you. How can you even look at me? How can you stand to be in the same room with a daughter who was so stupid and so blind? She collapsed onto a stool, burying her face in her hands. I have nothing, Dad. He took my money, he took my pride, and he almost took you. I am a failure. I stepped forward and placed my hands on her shoulders. They were shaking. I waited until she looked up at me. You are not a failure, Kendra. I said, my voice firm but gentle. You are a survivor. You fell in love with a master manipulator. It happens to the best of us. The smartest people can be conned because con men do not target stupidity, they target hope. He used your hope against you, but you are awake now, and that is all that matters. But I cost you so much, she whispered. The lawyer fees, the stress, the damage to the warehouse. I smiled a tired, sad smile. Money is just paper, Kendra, and machines are just metal. You can replace paper and you can fix metal. But I could not replace you. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was only 3 p.m. The sun was still high. Go wash your face, I said. Put on some comfortable shoes. We are going for a ride. Kendra sniffed, wiping her nose with a tissue. Where are we going? We are going to the warehouse, I said. It is time you saw what he really broke, and it is time you understood why I fought so hard to keep him out. The warehouse district was quiet in the afternoon light. The rain had washed away the grime, leaving the old brick buildings looking stark and dignified. I parked the car in front of the main gate. The biometric lock was still there, glowing red, waiting for my thumbprint. I pressed my hand against the scanner. It beeped cheerfully and the heavy door clicked open. Kendra hesitated at the threshold. She was afraid of what she would see. She was afraid to confront the scene of the crime. Come on, I said gently. It is just a building. We walked inside. The air was cool and smelled of old oil dust and ozone. It was the smell of my career, the smell of invention. I flipped the breaker, and the high overhead lights buzzed to life, illuminating the cavernous space. It looked like a graveyard of giants. The tarps were still on the floor where Bryce had ripped them down. The machines stood in the center of the room, exposed and vulnerable. The damage was visceral. The glass casing of the gyroscope was shattered, the shards glittering on the concrete like diamonds. The hydraulic arm of the pressure system was bent at an unnatural angle, the metal twisted by the force of the bolt cutters. Wires hung loose from the solar array like severed nerves. Kendra gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Oh my God, she whispered. He destroyed them. He really destroyed them. She walked slowly down the aisle, stepping over the debris. She reached out and touched the jagged edge of the broken solar lens. He said it was junk, she said, her voice filled with anger. He told me it was just a pile of rusted scrap metal. He said you were hoarding trash. I walked up beside her. To him it was junk, I said, because he looked with his eyes, not with his mind. He saw rust and he saw dust. He wanted gold bars, Kendra. He wanted stacks of cash he could grab and spend at a casino. When he saw these machines, he felt cheated. He thought I was poor. He thought I was a fraud. I kicked a piece of twisted copper wire across the floor. He broke them because he did not understand them. I continued. He thought that by smashing the glass he was hurting me. He thought he was destroying my wealth. Kendra looked at me, tears welling up again. But he did hurt you, Dad. These are your inventions. This is your life's work. They are ruined. I shook my head slowly. I walked over to the Mark I hydraulic system. The cast iron casing was cracked where he had hammered it, but the core was still solid. I placed my hand on the cold metal, feeling the history vibrating under my palm. No, Kendra, I said. He did not ruin anything. He only broke the shell. I gestured for her to come closer. I pointed to a small brass plate riveted to the side of the machine. It was tarnished and covered in grease, but the engraved numbers were still visible. Read that, I said. Kendra squinted. U.S. Patent Number 4, 590221, she read. Property of Stone Mechanics. I nodded. I walked to the shattered gyroscope. I pointed to the base. And this one, I said. U.S. Patent Number 6781109. I turned to face her. The warehouse was silent, save for the hum of the lights. Bryce Miller was a fool, I said, my voice echoing off the walls. He thought the value was in the metal. He thought that if he stole the machine, he stole the money. But the machine is just a prototype. It is just a physical model of an idea. I tapped my temple with my index finger. The real value is not in this room, Kendra. The real value is in the United States Patent Office. The real value is in the licensing agreements I signed 30 years ago. I pointed to the broken hydraulic pump. That pump is not just a pump. The design inside of it, the specific way the valves open and close under extreme pressure, is currently being used in the landing gear of the space shuttle. NASA pays me a royalty every time a new shuttle is built. They pay me every year just to keep the exclusive rights to that design. I pointed to the smashed solar array. That lens configuration is the heart of the solar farms in the Mojave Desert. The energy company sends a check to the trust every quarter. I walked over to the gyroscope, the one he had stomped on with his boot. And this. This is the stabilization unit for deep-sea drilling rigs. The oil companies lease this patent for millions of dollars a year. Kendra looked around the room, her eyes wide with shock. She looked at the rust. She looked at the dust. And suddenly she saw what I saw. She saw the invisible river of wealth that flowed from these ugly, broken machines. Bryce was standing in the middle of a gold mine, I said, and he was too stupid to pick up a shovel. He broke the prototypes thinking he was destroying my fortune, but all he did was break some glass and iron. The blueprints are safe. The patents are safe. The trust is safe. I took Kendra's hand. It was cold, but I held it tight, transferring my warmth and my strength to her. This is your inheritance, Kendra. Not a pile of cash to be spent on flashy cars or jewelry. Not money that attracts leeches like Bryce. This is intellectual property. It is the fruit of my brain and your mother's patience. I looked her in the eye, intense and serious. I kept this warehouse to remind myself of where I started. I kept these prototypes because they were the first ones. The ones I built with my own hands when nobody believed a black man from the South Side could engineer a spacecraft part. I let go of her hand and spread my arms wide, encompassing the wreckage. Bryce called this trash. But do you know what this really is? This is proof. Proof that they can break our bodies, they can break our windows, and they can even break our hearts. But they cannot break our minds. Kendra walked over to the hydraulic pump. She touched the brass plate reverently. She ran her fingers over the name, Stone Mechanics. She looked at the date, 1985, the year she was born. "You did this for me," she whispered. "I did it for us," I corrected. "I did it so that you would never have to depend on a man for money. I did it so you would have the freedom to make mistakes and survive them." I walked over to the wall where a small framed photo of Lucille hung crookedly. Bryce had knocked it askew, but he hadn't broken it. I straightened it. "Your mother knew," I said. "She knew that one day you would need this. She told me to keep the patents in the trust. She said, Ulysses, don't give her the fish. Give her the ocean." Kendra began to cry again, but this time she was smiling through the tears. She looked at the broken machines and she didn't see failure. She saw victory. She saw a legacy that was bulletproof, fireproof, and idiot-proof. "I am sorry I doubted you, Dad," she said. I put my arm around her. "It is okay," I said. "You see it now. That is all that matters." We stood there for a long time amidst the ruins of the fake war Bryce had started, honoring the real victory that had been won decades ago. The warehouse was ugly, it was dark, it was dusty, but to us standing there in the silence, it was the most beautiful bank vault in the world. And the best part was that the thief had left empty-handed because he didn't know how to carry the weight of brilliance. It has been exactly 365 days since the gavel fell. The seasons have changed, and so has the landscape of my life. I drove down to the warehouse district this morning, but I did not have to hide my car behind a dumpster. I parked right in front of the newly painted steel gates. The rust is gone. The peeling gray paint is gone. In its place is a mural, bright and vibrant, painted by local artists, showing gears turning into flowers and circuits becoming city skylines. Above the entrance, a new sign hangs proud and heavy. The Ulysses Stone Center for Innovation. I walked inside. The silence that used to haunt this place is gone, buried under the hum of activity. The air no longer smells of stagnation and decay. It smells of soldering iron smoke, fresh coffee, and the sweat of hard work. The darkness has been chased away by floor-to-ceiling windows that let the sunlight pour in, washing over the rows of workbenches. Where Bryce saw a pile of junk, I now see the future. 20 young men and women were already there, heads bent over circuit boards and blueprints. They come from the same neighborhood I did. They grew up being told that engineering was not for them, that technology was a language they could not speak. But here they are, speaking it fluently. I walked down the central aisle. The broken prototypes are still there, but they are no longer tragic ruins. We cleaned them up. We mounted them on pedestals. They are now teaching tools. The shattered gyroscope sits in a glass case with a plaque that reads, "Resilience." The bent hydraulic arm is displayed next to the blueprints showing how to fix it. I stopped at a workbench where a young man named Marcus was struggling with a robotic actuator. He is 19 years old, brilliant, and hungry for knowledge, but he lacks patience. He was cursing softly, trying to force a wire into a terminal. I placed my hand on his shoulder. "Easy, son," I said. "You cannot force the connection. You have to respect the resistance." Marcus looked up. He wiped his grease-stained hands on his apron. "It won't fit, Mr. Stone," he said, frustrated. "The tolerance is too tight." I smiled. "The tolerance is perfect," I said. "It is your grip that is too tight. Relax your hand. Let the machine tell you where it wants to go." He took a deep breath. He tried again, moving slower with more deliberation. The wire clicked into place. His face lit up with the pure, unadulterated joy of discovery. That right there is why I fought. That moment of realization. Bryce wanted to sell this building for parts. He wanted to strip the copper out of the walls to pay for his gambling. If he had succeeded, Marcus would not be here. This center would be a vacant lot, and these kids would still be believing the lie that they do not belong in a lab. I walked to my office at the back of the warehouse. It used to be a dusty storage closet. Now it is a command center. I sat down at my desk and looked out the glass wall at the floor. I saw a legacy that was alive. I saw a future that was secure. And for the first time in 40 years, I felt that I had finally built something that would outlast me. The door to my office opened, and Kendra walked in. If you had seen her a year ago, you would not recognize her today. The woman who stood in my doorway was not the fragile, tearful girl who begged me to save her husband. She was a force of nature. She was wearing a tailored blazer and holding a tablet with the confidence of a general holding a battle plan. Her hair was cut short, sharp, and professional. Her eyes were clear, free of the fog of manipulation. "Good morning, Dad," she said, placing a cup of coffee on my desk. "Black, no sugar." She sat down opposite me and swiped her screen to life. "We need to review the quarterly grant applications," she said, her voice crisp. "We have 50 applicants for the fall semester scholarship. I have narrowed it down to 10. And I also reviewed the proposal from that tech firm that wants to partner with us." She paused, looking up at me over the rim of her glasses. "I rejected them," she said flatly. I raised an eyebrow. "Why is that? They offered a lot of money." "They did," Kendra said. "But I read the fine print. They wanted ownership rights to any student patents developed during the internship. They wanted to harvest our talent and keep the intellectual property for themselves. It was a predatory clause hidden on page 40. She leaned back, crossing her arms. "I told them that the Stone Trust does not sign away ownership. We build owners. If they want to partner with us, they can donate equipment, but the patents stay with the students. Take it or leave it." I smiled. "And what did they say?" Kendra smirked, an expression that reminded me so much of her mother. "They took it. The equipment arrives on Monday." I looked at my daughter with a swelling sense of pride that was almost painful. She had learned. She had walked through the fire of betrayal, and she had come out forged in steel. Bryce had called her a cow. He had called her stupid. He had tried to steal her voice. But in doing so, he had inadvertently woken up the sleeping giant inside her. She was no longer just the beneficiary of the trust. She was the manager. She handled the lawyers. She handled the accountants. She sniffed out bad deals with the instinct of a bloodhound. She had taken the pain of her marriage and turned it into armor. She saw me staring at her. "What is it?" she asked, checking her reflection in the glass. "Do I have grease on my face?" "No," I said softly. "You look just like your mother." Kendra softened. Her business mask slipped for a second, revealing the warmth underneath. "I miss her," she said. "I miss her too," I said. "But she would be terrified of you right now. You are tougher than she ever was." Kendra laughed. "I had to be. I had a good teacher." She stood up, gathering her things. "I have a lunch meeting with the city council. I am going to get us that zoning permit for the expansion if I have to stare them down until they blink." She walked to the door, but stopped. She turned around, her hand on the knob. "By the way, Dad," she said, her voice dropping a few octaves, "the mail came to the house this morning. I left a letter on the kitchen counter for you." She paused. "It is from the penitentiary." The air in the office grew still. We looked at each other, acknowledging the ghost that still tried to haunt us. "Do you want me to shred it?" she asked. "No," I said. "I will handle it." She nodded. "I know you will." She walked out, closing the door behind her. I watched her walk across the warehouse floor, stopping to correct a student's posture, giving advice with a firm hand. She was the queen of this castle now, and I knew that no man would ever be able to lie to her again. That evening I sat in my living room. The fire was crackling in the hearth, casting long dancing shadows against the walls. The house was peaceful. The storm was long gone. I picked up the envelope from the counter. It was cheap standard issue prison stationery. The return address was stamped in red ink. Nevada State Correctional Facility, inmate number 894022, Bryce Miller. I did not open it immediately. I held it, weighing it in my hand. It felt light, insignificant. I used my letter opener to slit the top. I pulled out the single sheet of lined yellow paper. The handwriting was cramped and messy, written with a dull pencil. "Dear Ulysses," I started reading. "I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to you because I have found God in here. I have had a lot of time to think about my actions, and I realize now that I was wrong. I was sick, Ulysses. I was not myself." I skipped a paragraph of rambling apologies. Then I got to the point, the hook. "I am trying to take some classes in here. I want to learn a trade so I can be a better man when I get out. But the classes cost money, and I need supplies. I have nobody else to ask. My family has cut me off. I know I hurt you, but I am asking for Christian charity. If you could just send $500 to my commissary account, it would change my life. Please, for the sake of the love I once had for your daughter." I lowered the paper. He had not changed. He had not found God. He had found a new angle. He was still the same con man, just working a smaller room. He thought that time would soften me. He thought that if he used the right buzzwords like redemption and charity, I would open the checkbook. He was still underestimating me. I stood up and walked to the fireplace. The heat was intense, warming my face. I looked at the letter one last time. I did not feel anger. I did not feel hate. I felt absolutely nothing. He was a stranger to me now, a bad memory that was fading with every passing day. I tossed the letter into the fire. It landed on a burning log. The yellow paper curled instantly, turning brown, then black. The words "Christian charity" and $500 disappeared in a burst of orange flame. I watched it burn until there was nothing left but ash. I turned away from the fire and looked around my home. It was safe. The deed was secure. The locks were changed. My daughter was thriving. My legacy was growing. I walked to the window and looked out at the night sky. The stars were bright, clear, and unblinking. I took a sip of my tea and whispered into the quiet room. "You tried to break in, Bryce. You tried to break us. But you forgot that stones do not break. We only settle deeper into the earth." I turned off the light. Family protected. Mission accomplished. I walked up the stairs to my bedroom, my knees aching slightly, but my heart lighter than air. Tomorrow was Saturday. Marcus needed help with the solar actuators. Kendra needed help with the zoning proposal. I had work to do. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to waking up. I learned that true value is rarely found on the surface. Bryce looked at my life and saw only rust and old age. He missed the diamonds hidden in the dust because he was blinded by his own greed. But the greatest legacy I leave my daughter is not the patent royalties or the warehouse. It is the lesson that you must look deeper to find the truth. Real wealth is not what you can steal or spend. It is the resilience to rebuild when your world is shattered. We are stones. We do not glitter like fool's gold, but we endure like the earth. If you believe a father's duty is to protect his children at all costs, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below, would you have forgiven Kendra for bringing a wolf into the sheepfold, or is loyalty something that once broken can never be fixed? See you in the next story.